grab something really quick. She's just got to turn on the streaming here. We're on the 40-second delay. What are you eating that I didn't see over there? You brought something.
I brought it.
Yeah.
It
I
is
should have
so
brought
good,
something.
I gotta tell you.
Where'd you get that?
It's a scone from Empire. Oh my God.
I love the scones at, my favorite scone is at Sidewinders.
Yeah.
Sidewinders has my favorite scone.
They have the best scone until I got to this one, and now it's like,
Good, thank you. Welcome, everybody, to Friday, February the 17th, a special regular council meeting that's including some items close to the public today. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, the Syilx, and the Sinixt peoples, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment and our strength as a community. And the next item that's supposed to be on the agenda is late items, and it got missed when we printed the agenda. And there will be a late item added to the end of today's meeting. The one day it's not on the agenda as a number, and we have a late item. So that'll be added to the end. It's pertaining to AKBLG resolutions. So that will be added under item 9. And also a change in order is that we're changing the order of 8 and 9. So recommendations from staff, we're gonna have budget first, and then we will have recommendations and requests, the addenda. It got slotted in the wrong spot there. So seeing that, I would like to ask for a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Moved by Woodward, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. All those in favor, and nobody's opposed, and that carries. Okay, moving on to item 4 on the agenda. We have the adoption of minutes of previous meetings. So we've had a number of meetings, a number of special council meetings, and these are all, for anybody that's out there watching, these have all been times that we've come together to talk about budget. It's exciting, the budget time. So we have November the 8th, November the 14th, November the 22nd, December the 5th, December the 6th, and December the 9th. We can pass these all together unless someone sees an error or an omission and would like to pull one out.
I'll move.
Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. No errors and omissions, everybody's good? Okay, all those in favor, and nobody's opposed, and that carries. Thank you. So resolution number 5, a resolution to close a public meeting, and it's the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of council and staff and any approved audiences be excluded from this meeting, and that the special closed meeting of council continue under section 91C and K of the community charter to deal with matters relating to the following: labor relations and provision of a municipal service. Could I have a motion to move in camera, please? Moved by Councillor Lockenberg, seconded by Councillor Woodward. All those in favor, and that's carried. Thank you.
Scissors
Open,
to
everyone. So, because we only have 20 minutes before our lunch break and that we will be recessing again, CFO Chris Jury is just going to run us through just some general, before we get into operating, because everybody always wants to know at the end of the day, what's going to be the tax increase? And just to be clear, we do not know at this current time what the City of Nelson tax increase is going to look like, but he has run a few scenarios for us. So over to you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so we're still at those early stages, but I know this was something that came up at, I don't know, was it the last council meeting or the one before that? I can't recall.
Last Friday,
But it was, you know, what is a 1% tax increase? What is a 2% tax increase? You know, we talk about that for the city. 1% tax increase is, you know, roughly $100,000 in revenue. But what does that mean for the individual, the homeowner, the single-family dwelling? So I put this together. This is this one pager here on tax rate scenarios for 2023. I'll just kind of quickly kind of run through it. So in 2022, the average. There's lots of different classifications underneath what's residential property. There's single-family dwelling, there's strata, there's vacant land. So I've just pulled out a single-family dwelling and strata and kind of amalgamated those to come up with what an average would have been in Nelson in 2022, and that was 641,000 was your average single-family dwelling / strata. And that property for municipal taxes only, so just City of Nelson taxes, would have been $1,830 in 2022. And again, that's just the municipal side, which I think is 49%, so roughly half of what the total taxes would be on that property.
And just point of clarification?
Yes.
That's what we control.
Correct.
The other 50% we do not control.
Yes, that's regional district, school tax.
Hospital
there's
tax.
Some smaller ones on there, yeah.
Thank you.
MFA.
MFA, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. In 2023, those properties increased, according to BC assessment, 5.1%. And this is just the market change. So this doesn't factor in any new construction. And new construction tends to be at the higher end of the scale. So when you see some statistics go through that say, well, you know, property values increased this much, we're looking at just that home that existed in 2022. What happened to that in 2023? So it's an existing home. It doesn't factor in, hey, somebody added a new garage, or there's a really new expensive house that is down the block, or any of that kind of thing. So if you owned the typical home in 2022, it went up 5.1% in 2023. So based on that, I just kind of did a few scenarios down here. Oh, sorry, before that. So that home is $674,000 in 2023. So I just did some kind of scenarios of, okay, what would be a 2% tax increase, a 3% tax increase, 4 or 5, and that's kind of in the block down below there. So 2% is $37, which I think is pretty close to what I talked about last time. I might have said 36 or something.
You did,
like that.
yeah.
You know, a 3% is $55, 4% would be $73, and a 5% would be $92 increase over the year. And I just also broke that out to be, you know, what would that be per month, right? So a 2% tax increase would be $3 a month, a 3%, $4.58, etc. Also, using the power of Google, I took a look at what some other municipalities were looking at for tax increases for 2023. It's still early for a lot, so the sample's a bit small, but here's some of the ones that the press had been reporting on anyway from their council meetings, just to kind of give you an indication of where other places are at. You know, Castlegar, 6.65%. You know, on the high end, Terrace, 10.33%. And I know that every municipality has their unique situations, and we talked about Lake Country and them tipping over the population size for RCMP. So there's lots of different things happening. So you can't really look at each one and say, well, you know, we're the same as this place. Everybody's kind of unique, but you know, there's some lower ones on here, 3.8% for Kelowna, but you know, Nanaimo 9%. So it's quite a range, which is not uncommon. But if you were to kind of ballpark this out and say what's an average, it's probably in that 5% 6% sort of range in there. Yeah.
Question, Mary?
Yes.
Thank you. So, Chris, like, I guess it's really hard because some of these places like might need some major infrastructure piece, or they could have been maybe keeping their taxes really low during COVID, like we did.
Yep.
Those kind of things, right? I was just wondering, like, out of all of these, I mean, do you think, what happened during that COVID period is that playing out now in a lot of these towns to try to like recover some of the?
Well, you definitely saw that in the tax increases last year. I think when we went and did the same analysis last year, there was a lot of that pent up sort of like, hey, we did a couple of years of zero, now we got to do double digit. So you definitely saw that last year. I haven't dug into these ones to kind of, see what the background is on all of them. If there was discussion of why, Terrace is 10.33, there's clearly something in there, but was it, they had a few years of zero? Was it that there's they need to beef up their reserves? Was it something on the operating side? I don't have all of that analysis. This was just sort of a snapshot of kind of what you're looking at. Yeah.
Thank you.
I would also say it's, that inflation we're
Yeah, I
seeing,
was
right?
just gonna-
When
do we know what
inflation was
inflation?
8%.
What was it?
I said when inflation was peaked at 8%, hasn't, it's not increasing at that same rate, but it's still built in, right? So those products, when we're buying pipe, when we're buying whatever, and I would suspect you're also, for those that had open collective agreements, there were higher wage increases in those as well. I know what other munis have settled recent contracts with QP, all of them, there's some bonuses in there, there's some, larger increases in 2023, so there's a lot of cost pressure in these budgets.
Thank you.
And we definitely have those more pronounced on the inflation side when you look at the capital side of things. Like that's where, a lot of those pipes and things are in the water and wastewater utility. On hydro, for example, like they're seeing that for transformers and poles. On the operating side, I mean, half of what we have is wages, and so that's, we know what the collective agreements are. The materials side of things is a little bit, less than what you'd see on the capital, and maybe less impacted by the big inflation numbers that we're seeing. So, but yeah, definitely on the capital side, we're seeing that.
Yeah, and-
Councillor Lockenberg, you have a question?
Yeah, the big driver from the way I think about it last year was protective services. On the operations side, we had a new staff on police, which you could have said, bang, there it is right there. But I'm wondering if how much housing starts. We had good housing starts through COVID, and that means new tax, new building permitting that kind of washes out, but certainly new taxes. Doesn't look like we're going to have that at the same pace. The implications on tax increases from sort of kind of banked on those housing starts more or less, or at least we certainly benefited from them. If we see that drop, we're going to see the pressure there. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so for new construction in 2023, we know what that is already because those were assessed already in 2022. So we know what the ads are for 2023. I think it's just over 100,000.
90.
Okay, just under 9. What was that?
91.
91,000. Okay. For 2024 and beyond, we don't know, and we normally don't budget for something. When it comes in, it's sort of a bonus. But rather than say like, hey, we know of all these projects and let's put in 150,000, and then it doesn't happen. Now we're short. So we usually just kind of, when that comes in, that's kind of our bonus, right? So 100,000 a year is pretty typical.
Right.
It's been lower in some years, been a little higher in some years, but.
So will there be any pressure in this year from that? Like if
We know what that is, and it's in here. Like it's locked in.
Yeah.
Like it, been assessed. It's taxable now, so it's in the budget already for 2023.
I guess I'm thinking mostly about Nelson Shores, and that potential, like that completes when?
It's a phase project.
Yeah, but he said he felt pretty strong that phase one would be done by end of 2023. Is that? Did I not? I thought
You don't construct in a year.
Yeah, for what he's doing there,
I
like,
was gonna say,
Yes.
wow, that's impressive.
I know, but I thought he literally
July,
said
yeah.
that we are
Yeah.
committed, we're confirmed, we're
it's not gonna get assessed until, like Kevin was saying, things get assessed in July, and it's probably not gonna be there in
assessed until.
July, so
Till-
you're not looking at,
Okay.
you know, you're always kind of like a year probably behind even on something that's rapid fire. I mean, Crepes takes, I don't know, how long it take to build your house, took 10 months to build my house. I mean, let alone on a whole, you know,
Yeah.
bunch of houses.
Yeah. I was the one I was kind of holding out for.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Well, we
get
have-
built.
we have this large project on Vernon Street that's
Yeah.
private, that will be taxable, but things like, as we know, the health campus. what do we
Not
call that?
taxable.
Not taxable.
No.
These nonprofit housing projects, not taxable. So
Yeah.
some of our new construction just went taxable. We're still providing services, maintaining roads, and all those sorts of things.
But-
They're not taxable.
But just to be clear, the two, I guess, that's the major one that I'm sort of looking forward to. I think that's going to be a significant. We're not counting that, even though we know it's going to get built, or we're
Well, I think
highly
that's
confident.
100,000 a year that Chris is projecting. And you're going
Oh, it isn't. It is
Only for 2023. So 2024, I don't have any new construction baked into there at all.
So
including
for
Nelson
taxes,
Shores. Got it.
What's in, maybe we'll cover that when we get to the
Yep.
line items, because there's taxes.
2023 in the document that we'll pass out at lunch here has, just new construction in it and a 0% tax increase, just as a base. This is what would happen if we did nothing.
Yeah.
And then he's projected out for 24, 25, 26, 27.
Yeah,
They'll say what the assumptions were when we get into.
When we get into that, okay. Okay. Thanks.
yeah. So, I mean, just to boil it down, I guess if you're in a situation where, we're contemplating between, should it be 4%, should it be 5%? This kind of helps boil it down, I suppose, to what the impact that would be in a year, in a month for that typical home. And some are going to be more, some are going to be less. There is no typical home, right? So,
And we never have a conversation with the RD or the school board about where they're going to land, so that we can kind
School
of
board is.
School board is their
doesn't
own
set
entity.
taxation, but
right.
the
Ministry?
province sets,
Ministry says that.
and it's set region-wide. So, and that's a lobbying thing that, maybe should be done by council is, the fact that houses are, just happen to be more expensive in Nelson, should they pick up more part of the whole school budget? Because houses are less than Preston, and so really, people in this area are subsidizing, schooling in other parts of the district, because it's tax district wide.
Yeah.
Is that fair? Should there be a combination of that? I would say, most of our residents are carrying larger mortgages because their housing prices is quite a bit more. It's not like just because your house is more, it actually probably costs you more than someone that is paying less for housing. A school teacher doesn't make less in Preston than in Nelson. Or, none of those people make less money there. It's just you have to pay more for housing here, whether that's rental or
Right.
Right, so, sorry, so you're, right, so how
So
far
should
your
house,
money goes
well,
here?
should school tax be a flat tax? Should we all pay $100
Right,
versus the fact that, I always use the example of like, so I have two homes and one home will cost me on the $100 theory will cost me $400 and the other home will cost me $100 based on size of the home.
right.
I think the school
So
tax
I'm
is
just
about a
sorry.
factor of 4.
I'm just trying to. So here in Nelson, with these average housing prices, which is probably pretty fairly high for a small town, interior town. So when there's a teacher here working and paying for their mortgage here versus a teacher in, well, I was in Creston. So that, the
Because
money,
that's part of our school district.
Right.
Preston, Nelson. Or Castle, that's part of the school district as well.
but your money just doesn't go as far here. So it's,
But I don't think, just to be clear, I don't think that's the part that we're talking about. It's more like, regardless of how much the salaries are across the board,
yes,
the net cost to maintain the whole district is bore more heavily on the Nelson taxpayer. So
Right.
we pay, regardless of how much we pay more.
Because we pay based on our property assessment.
And if our assessments go up more than the neighboring municipalities, we pick up more of that,
right, thank you,
that increase.
thank you, that's
Yeah.
great. I just want,
Yeah, and the secondary part of it, you know, some people will say, well, you have a, you know,
Higher net worth,
Yeah.
maybe.
however, your mortgage is probably double the person that
right,
is in Preston, or your rent's double.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that come into play, but there's a lot of other things on that tax bill,
you're right.
right? The hospital, you know, that's quite high. I think Nelson's one of the highest. The next, in terms of the hospital board, which is a very, always strikes me as an oddity, is because the hospital board includes Kootenai Boundary, and Kootenai Boundary actually goes to Big White. Okay, so just get the geography in your head. This is always a funny one for me. I guess it's not really funny, but it's an oddity. So, so I've got my ski chalet in Big White. So in fact, those people that are getting taxed there are actually probably paying more hospital tax than I'm paying here for hospital tax, because that's just, their assessment's just that much higher. But I just can't imagine how many people that live at Big White don't drive to the Kelowna Hospital. They're not driving to the Trail Hospital, right? It's like the oddities of how they've put these regional districts together to then tax for hospital boards is a bit strange in my mind. It's just more about the geography as opposed to what the cost is as well, in terms of the fact that I'm pretty sure that nobody's ever at Big White called the ambulance and been taken to the Trail Hospital or even Grand Forks, right? So, but they're part of the West Kootenai Boundary Hospital District. Sometimes I just think we need to redraw the lines a little bit too sometimes.
REAB is holding on to Big White as strong as they can, right? Subsidizing a lot of services in the rest of the area.
So I'm just interested to get all the, what to me is relevant data out on the table. So I found that inflation, the average annual for 2022 was 6.9%.
Yep, correct.
Consumer price index, 6.638%. And then the projection
Sorry, guys.
for 2023 for inflation is still going to be 6.3%. Did
For
you?
2023?
2023, I found a projection.
Well, I know Bank of Canada had lower numbers than that.
Yeah, they were
Well,
going
the
3 to
numbers
4.
that I saw said we will reach 3%.
Yeah.
But as that goes down, I don't know how they're getting those numbers, but right now they're 8. Did they get to 8 this year?
No, we're down to.
No, but I mean, at some point during this year, was it 8 at the end of last year? I don't keep
In
those.
2022, it peaked at 8.
Okay.
The
So
highest
I
at
just
8.
want to make sure that that information is out there, so that as we go through this process and look at these various numbers, that the reality of what's available to us.
Which is a double-edged sword,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because we're facing those inflationary pressures just like everybody else is.
Yeah.
And our citizens are.
Are
paying that
facing
on
them as well.
Everything else as well. Food and
Yeah.
all the other things. You know, I think one of the saving graces is, you know, obviously rents and those things haven't gone up by those inflationary numbers. And energy costs have come down from those peaks. They're the biggest thing that is driving that reduction in inflation right now is energy costs have got off those peaks and are actually negative at this stage. That's supporting the fact that food costs are still at that higher than the 6. So it's tough.
Yeah, but it is a part of what we have to consider as we move forward in this. Yeah,
Yeah, and with the inflation and higher interest rates, you know, we do make a higher return on our investments. So I looked at our January interest rate on our high interest savings account, and it was 0.8%, and now it's 4.7%. So do you have that cushion a little bit, I suppose, that helps?
Kind of reflected in your numbers already, though.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know. It's for 2023. Like, do we see that staying consistent for the whole year, though? It's, again, not one of those things that you want to say like, yeah, we're going to get 500,000 in investment income, and then you don't. So, it's good to be conservative.
prudent, yeah.
Yeah, if we didn't have those higher interest income for 2022, we'd be a lot more over budget than we are. About 300,000.
Yep.
Offset those costs by about $300,000.
Yeah, it's 160 to 400 or something.
240.
Yeah.
So it would be another $250,000 over budget
Yeah.
if not for that.
Yeah.
But, may I?
Yes, sure.
Sorry, we're just kind of having a bit of a free range
Yeah,
discussion.
yeah. No, I mean,
Okay.
that's why I was here, because, I mean, we're gonna break for, well, it's already after 12, we should probably, but, I mean, just in this sort of, just so we get a feel for how we end up where we end up, and that
Well, I'm
talking about the tax bill is important.
Just thinking, when we set a tax rate for the citizens, like, we need to operate, through the year with the money that we've gotten with our tax rate. But it's no good for anybody if we're like, if say inflation's happening high, we're spending a lot of money, we're going into debt, or not into debt, but we're not, able to stay sustainable. That's not good for the city as this organization, but it's also not good for our community, because we're struggling, man. So we're really trying to get that, where there's a sustainability piece going across the board. And so I just hope that, like, people understand that the health of the city is kind of the health of the community. They're really interlocked. Piece there, that's correct, right?
Yeah, absolutely. 'Cause I kind of refer to, if we're not covering our ongoing costs, you're really putting it on your credit card. And eventually, you have to pay your credit card.
Which is no good for the entire community, because we're struggling to pay that
Or
off.
we're not maintaining,
Our services.
infrastructure or parks, et cetera.
Putting less into reserves, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so you're eventually gonna have to make up for that.
Pay the piper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What we're always trying to strive for is the sweet spot.
Yeah.
You know, that's what we've done. I mean, and again, I can't emphasize enough that sometimes we kind of get really onto the negative side of looking at this, and the I don't want to say the sky is falling, but like, because the city has been so financially responsible. I mean, I would say, as liberal as councils might have been, some councillors coming to the table in terms of their political thought and aspiration. I mean, I would say that historically that city of Nelson has always had a fairly conservative group of people when it comes to making the financial decisions. And because of the fact that we've had quality financial decisions over 125 years, we're in a position where, unlike many organizations, we went, and you two were here, I think we did, what did we did? We did 1.5, 2, 0, and 4. I mean, we were able to do a 0 during COVID. And it didn't set us back any, right? It didn't compromise things. It didn't turn out that, oh my God, next year we had to do 8 because we shouldn't have given them 0 because we couldn't keep up with what was going on. And I think that we have that capacity. So we're not going to charge anybody more than what we need, but we're also going to have that little cushion of contingency in there. And I think the fact that, because we tend to be very consistent, and we spend all of this time talking about budget, like I have to say, I was at a meeting with the 3 mayors and the CAOs were there, and I was totally surprised when the CAO from Castlegar told me, sorry, and Kevin wasn't there, I had Chris with me, said, oh, we've already done the budget. And I said, You've been in office like 48 days and you've already done the 2023 budget. I'm sort of thinking like, you can't tell me that you don't have some of the things that, I mean, they don't have police, and they don't have, a few other things, but I mean, were able to get the budget done that quickly. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about the budget. The public gets more than enough, and that's probably why we get so many questions. Maybe we should learn the Castlegar way. Just do it in the first 30 days.
Kidding.
Get the budget. But it's just like, we contemplate these things and we agonize over them. But we always, I think we always come out with the right decision. I mean, we've got great staff that are working, helping us with the numbers, and we aren't going out there trying to pad the reserves, but we know that we need to have reserves. We're not going out there and trying to do something over here because we've been doing it all along, right? So I think that I asked for this because we had this little diagram last year. This was my ask to have something like this come forward, just so we could see that, because when you don't get to see the number, it's hard. Just like when Councillor Payne the other day talked about the fact that she was paying $36 for Netflix every month, and the cost for, I don't know what we were talking about, was going to be $36 for a whole
Taxes.
year, right? Now, there are, I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't people out there that can't afford $36 period, but I mean, it's that whole thing about making sure that the apples and the apples and the oranges are being compared, and that we can see these numbers in sort of real, tangible. It's much more tangible when I can see the numbers broken out than this big number that sort of shows up. Yeah, so I think we're sound, and I think that we're moving in the right direction. So I think it's been we have this little takeaway. I'm glad I'm not in Terrace
Yeah.
at 10.33 or Nanaimo at 9%. But yeah, so a little takeaway, and a little thing that you can keep there in terms of what the average for Nelson is as we look at those numbers, because Mr. Jury has given us 2, 3, 4, and 5%, and who knows where we're going to land. So again, I want to make that very clear. This isn't, we haven't made a decision yet, but this just helps us have some numbers so we can break it down into more bite-sized pieces. When you're eating the elephant, it's one piece at a time, as the story goes. So if I can have a motion to recess, all those R words, recess until 1 o'clock. And that's been moved by Councillor Lockenberg, it's been seconded by Councillor Payne. All those in favor of recess, and that's carried. So we'll see everybody back.
we'll discuss the 2023.
Excuse me, is your mic working? I can hardly hear you.
Yeah, I'm just asking for the corporate officer, just to move you. What happens here in this building is the microphones are set up for us to stream the meeting.
Okay.
And what happens is that there is no speakers. We're aware of that. We know that people that are now coming in the old days when it was just the council meetings, we could, for sure, you'd hear it more.
I
But we,
understand, and I think I'm getting accommodated here. Thank
yeah, and I've just asked her to accommodate you. I'm gonna get her to move you just over beside Amy
you. Yes,
and have a little seat there. And then Bill's been here often enough. If Bill can't hear, he'll just get a chair and move.
Unless you want me to get you one.
Probably our capital project going on here
Yes.
doesn't help.
Yeah, it doesn't help either. We are aware that we have a sound issue for in the back, and I know that that's something that our facilities manager is looking at, whether or not we can improve for when you come, which is kind of nice, because we really do want you to come to city council meetings and see us in action versus being on a computer. But we do have to fix that sound issue, so we'll just move you up for now. And then Amy, if you can make sure that you really, even so now with the
Enunciating well.
noise here, I'm gonna have a hard time hearing you, so. The microphones don't really do anything for those of us that are in the room. They are really just for the public that is at home.
thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Mayor. So we saw an increase in sales of service from a few areas. To name a few, there was an increase in our transit riders throughout the year. The youth center saw an increase in attendance and programs. And we also saw an increase in cemetery fees for 2022. These revenues were offset slightly due to some members from the RCMP having to come back to help cover some of the city challenges at the Nelson Department. So we do lose a little bit of offsetting revenue from that side. In other revenue from our own sources, we saw an increase in the number of business licenses that were purchased and a slight decrease in parking fines. This was due to a few new officers joining the force during the year, as well as the increase in bear activity kind of drawed the officers away from writing tickets if there was a bear event in the downtown core. In unconditional grants, we received an additional $100,000 from the Small Communities Grant, but unfortunately received $25,000 less of traffic fine sharing from the province. In conditional grants, we received quite a large increase in the Fire Smart program, as you may have remembered Jeff sharing earlier this year. We also received quite a few more youth grants. Unfortunately, there was a few small grants throughout the year that we had hoped to receive, but didn't come through. Interest revenue.
Amy, one question is, where are we with the Keep a Prisoner program?
We're slightly up for the prisoner income.
Yeah, and what dollar amount are we, or do you have that?
Yeah, I can grab that for you.
Because
We're still though down. I mean, I asked that question at the police
Yeah.
board meeting, and
Yeah.
we're not right back up in terms of the keep a prisoner, because it's still the effects of COVID in terms of the rules and stuff that were around that. So
We're
we're still down compared to where it has been.
Yeah.
But
We're up about 18,000 from 2022.
And what's the dollar amount?
Dollar amount.
Was the budget around 80 or something, I think?
Yeah, 80,000.
Okay. Yeah,
Was
because
the
that
budget.
historically was, I think, up to like 240
Yep.
in the peak, right?
Still way down from that. And
So that's another pressure on policing, is not only our cost increasing, our revenues have dropped there as well.
All right. For interest income, we saw an increase in interest rates during the year, which resulted in quite an increase in the interest income that we received.
And that'll factor into the reserves as well. This is just the general interest income, but in our reserves as well, we have interest income transfer in, so that'll form part of that as well.
Counselor Lockenberg.
I mean, interest rates are still high. They haven't gone down. So why has our interest income gone down in 2023?
I'm just being conservative.
Oh, you're just being conservative?
We could put 500,000 in there, but, you know, I'm just putting in, and this draft anyway, I'm putting in, and if I could see the future, you know, that would be fantastic, but.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just putting in a conservative number for now. And we can revisit that for sure, but that's kind of where I started off.
Well, when it comes to if we're going to be doing a tax increase,
Yep.
I would love to revisit this.
Oh, yeah, and
before we make that.
We're
final.
not making any decisions today. This is a first draft. I just wanted you to get an idea of where we're at. We put a 0% in here,
Yeah.
and things are still in flux. And you know, we're still reconciling our December investment income statements and things too. So
Right.
I don't want to, you know,
Get ahead of that.
overpromise and underdeliver. So,
Sure. Yeah. Fair enough.
I think the other consideration is that sustainable ongoing. So if our expenses aren't gonna go down when interest rates necessarily go down. Maybe some of the inflationary pressure, but as Chris said, that tends to be more on the capital side than the operating side. Our wages aren't going down or
Yeah.
et cetera. So I'd be a little cautious of, you know, saying, let's just put, you know, use higher interest income to moderate any tax increase, and then next year we go, okay, interest has gone down, we still have the expenditure, now we're, you know, instead of being 600 short, we're 800 short because we
Yeah.
took this extra income. I'd rather maybe even smooth it over a few years and normalize it, which I think is what Chris is trying to do there, and or use it for kind of one-off type of expenses if we have anything in here that, you know, we match that one higher bump with, you know, maybe a cost that's one time higher, so we can certainly look at that side of it.
Yeah, because I would say that projecting beyond 2023 makes sense that you would be extra conservative, but I think it's not much of a leap to assume that we're not going to have a big interest rate drop in 2023. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, thanks.
Awesome. So we're actually going to skip over the allocation from reserves and surplus for the moment because we'll touch base on those during the expenses. So we're going to drop down to line 27.
Amy, sorry, just one other thing, is just for clarity, and not sure what happened to Councillor Tate.
I know.
But I think it
Did
should be
anyone-
clear to the public what assumptions we've made in terms of taxation, like this is right now in 2023 is new construction is in this base amount right here. And how about going forward in 24, 25, 26, 27? Because those are higher numbers than
Yes.
2023. What's the assumptions? Because 2024, for example, is almost 300,000
Yeah.
higher than 2023.
Yep, so the inflation factor, I guess, added to property tax, or the implied increase there is 3% going forward from 2024 and beyond.
Okay, so
No
maybe
new construction there, though.
maybe we should have those at zeros and see
We
what
can
happens
land
with-
those at zero, yeah. And I know it's a 5-year financial plan, and we'll be looking at all of these things. Kind of the
Yeah,
main focus was on the 2023 numbers, but yeah.
And to be clear, this is very clearly a 0% tax increase for 2023, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah.
pretty clear. Just want to make that extra explicit.
Thought we'd lost you again.
Sorry.
All right, so jumping down to
sorry.
expenses.
Councillor Tate, just for your information on taxation,
Yes.
maybe Amy, you can walk through what's in taxation for 2023 and those future years, so. That's the first line up there, yeah.
Yep. So for 2023, we've got a 0% tax increase assumed, and then from 2024 to 2027, we have a 3%.
Okay,
in there.
thank you.
And then there's new construction of 100,000 $154,000 assumed in 2023, but none for 2024 to 2027 at this point.
Okay.
And to be clear, is that just sort of a percentage increase in new construction, or is it based on actual new construction projected, like Nelson
For
Shores?
2023,
Yeah,
that's actual new construction.
you know that.
Yeah,
and that's
that
going on.
assessment's come in because it was done in July
Right.
of last year, so we know what that is.
We know what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And are we past the appeal process and we don't have any?
Yeah,
Larger
there's that risk to the roll that they put out. I haven't had a chance to dig through that in detail, but we would be past that period now, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, one year we had the mall had sold and they appealed their assessment. That was significant when they won on appeal, and we lost significant tax revenues from that appeal.
Oh, wow, okay.
Okay, so now we're going to jump down to the expenses.
Keep going. Good job. I think we're on line 27, you said.
Yeah.
Right there. So under general government, we saw a larger decrease in the general admin and human resources, mainly due to our digitalization project. Things kind of started off a little bit slower than expected, so a lot of those expenses have been pushed to 2023 and 2024. So that ties back up to the use of COVID recovery funds in line 18. You'll notice we had budgeted $454,000 and only spent $83,000 as of December.
And we've,
Yeah,
and we bumped that
Yes.
to the 2023 budget, right?
correct.
Yeah.
Is there a sunset on the recovery funds?
No, haven't had any indication of any sort of deadline on that.
Okay, thank you.
So you can see in this budget, we have moved those same funds into those unspent under expenditure in 2022. We've just moved it into 2023 and
Okay.
intend to spend it this year.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we have those funds fully committed. It's not like we have some that, we don't know what we're gonna do with. It's just that digitization project started off a little slower than, than we expected to get going, but yeah, they're committed to that.
Thank you.
So we've moved that forward plus a little bit.
That, for the COVID recovery program.
So
we
the
did, yeah.
COVID recovery, that's the 454.
Yeah, so we,
And
in
then
that
we spent
450,
83, and that doesn't make it to 420 for me. So
Yeah.
we've added more to that fund.
Well, we had some budgeted for 2023.
Okay,
We increased that,
okay,
and then we're gonna shift some to 2024.
got it. Thank you.
It's not what we spent, it's what we took out of that pot and used. So
Yeah.
it's not like, those aren't really like, because we're up in the revenue zone still.
Yeah,
and that 450,
Still in revenues. I see her confusion. Are you with me?
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I totally get that part.
Okay.
It's just that if you have a certain amount to spend,
Yeah,
you spend part of that, and then you carry it forward. In our household, we would carry forward the difference between those two amounts, but there's an additional amount included in that.
Right.
That was already set aside
Yeah.
for 2022 digitization or whatever that, yeah. Thank
I
you.
guess what you're not seeing is what 2023 was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Finance, planning, and Nelson Next, as a group, saw a decrease in 2022 actuals due to some projects being delayed to 2023 or completed in-house rather than using contracted services. We also saved some expenses with a changeover of staff, specifically the CFO position that was vacant, or my position that was vacant for a few months. Dropping down to police. The police department saw an increase in labor, specifically overtime, to cover those who were unavailable or on WorkSafe. I think we all know the challenges they've been through the last year. As mentioned earlier, fire and emergency management were able to increase their funding for Fire Smart grants, which resulted in an equal increase in the expenses. Moving down to Public Works,
Sorry, Amy, just in terms of, is the overage mostly from the EM program, and we had more revenues come in from
Correct.
grants as well, so even though it looks like a budgeted overage on the expenditure side, we also had more revenues that made up for that overage.
Correct.
Is that fair to say? Yeah, okay.
Mayor, would
Yes.
there, on bylaw, where would we capture sort of managing parking with a new parking, like digital parking system? Would that be under bylaw, like the sort of software fees,
Yeah.
everything to manage that?
Any of the digital parking options we're looking at, and Amy's looking into a few, there's no real, the cost is a percentage of the revenue.
Okay.
So if we were to do that, we would just factor that into, we're losing some revenue to go to
Got
pay,
it. That makes
to
sense.
vendor fees. And whether that's a user pay system or we eat the cost and pay it, like those are decisions that can be made too. There's pros and cons of both, right?
Right. So in terms of the accounting of that,
Yep.
it's just sort of the cost of service, and this is just sort of a net of that. You wouldn't count it somewhere else and say, here's general. It would be a software subscription line or nothing like that. It fits in the cost. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. And then in terms of management of this new system, that we don't think will have any effect. I was thinking maybe even cheaper, but we're going to keep the same number of staff, and all the rest of the overhead will stay the same.
Yeah, I can't expect
Yeah.
there'd be any additional,
Yeah,
any cost
okay.
to that, really. I mean, bylaw officers, it's an extra little thing they gotta do on their handheld to see
Yeah.
if the person's paid
Totally.
online. We gotta reconcile an additional revenue source when we're doing bank recs, but we already have the staff for that.
Great. So kind of a neutral service.
Yep,
just
other
an-
than those, that
put an
fees that
efficiency.
you have to pay to the supplier.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Feels-
I think basically we're projecting we're going to recover those somehow, either have more revenues or
Maybe even more revenue.
or lost. The
Increased
thing,
compliance is the big thing.
Right.
You know, if you're sitting at the restaurant and you know that you've got, your meter's expired, you're maybe likely to pay for that extra time on your phone rather than just take a chance. So, yeah,
Yeah.
things like
Yeah.
that.
So we're seeing this as a win. I mean, a financial win
For sure.
across the board.
And a
Great.
customer service win as well.
And
I
a
think.
convenience and everything else. Yeah. Good.
the one thing that isn't in here that we haven't really explored with council is, do you want to expand parking to Sundays, later in the evenings, etc. So that's still a discussion we should have. So we haven't budgeted any of this for any expansion of hours, and there's probably some costs associated with that. You're gonna have to have more bylaw time to. if
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
gonna
They'd
do
have to
that.
work an extra day if we did Sundays.
Yeah,
or-
yeah.
Sure.
So we haven't done the sort of the cost benefit of that at that stage, and with this new potentially the online option, I guess is much digital option, we can expand obviously parking areas as well. We don't have to put meters everywhere, which was the restriction in the past. We can have metered or paid parking in areas that aren't currently metered. And again, that's a discussion that has to be had.
Yeah, we hope to kind of get some folks from different departments together, bylaw, development services, finance, and kind of come up with some options and things to discuss and maybe bring you some ideas and talk about that. We'll hopefully do that this year.
Through the chair. You might have said this and it just didn't go into my head. The parking revenue falls under sales of service?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to Public Works. So street maintenance, just some examples in case people are wondering. That would include minor patching and paving pieces, and street sweeping, for examples. 2022 came in nicely on budget. Snow removal came in over 2022's budget due to the heavy snowfalls that many of us know about and Charlie Henderson spoke about earlier this year. Thankfully, 2022 is going much better. 2023. For some comparisons, as of pay period 3 in 2023, we've only spent about 35% of the costs compared to what we spent in 2022. In addition to just those labor savings, we spent roughly 163,000 last year on contracted services, whereas in 2023, we've been able to do everything in-house so far. So that's a good story. Public Works Other, this consists of,
So Amy,
Yep.
just on street maintenance, that would include leaf pickup as well, right?
Yeah, she said.
correct, yeah,
Okay.
street sweeping. Yeah.
So,
Sweeping and leaf pickup.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's an interesting number to look at when, collect, or picking up sand, leaves, and minor sort of maintenance on our roads is larger than snow plowing budget. So it's those, those other things are a bigger cost than actually snow plowing.
It's a lot more days of the year as well, like than actual snow plowing.
Well, we do leaf pickup for about 6 weeks, 8 weeks in the fall, and we do sand collection or sweeping for I think about the same 6 to 8 weeks. So
More than snow. More days than snow.
depends.
Yeah.
We run. If it's not just when it snows, if we have icy conditions, etc. So we'll have equipment. So it's not just snow plowing, it's snow and ice management. So I don't, that'd be a good question to ask because both are really equipment and personnel, right? So
And then,
fuel, yes.
and then can I have a quick question? Sure. So I recognize that on heavy snow days, the contracting goes up. So outside of contracting, if we're seeing a decrease in cost for this line item on snow, like basically our staff are not doing snow pickup, so that's going to have to then appear somewhere else. Like there's going to be another line that'll pick it up.
Yeah, I think a lot of the utility labor gets pulled. It's all hands on deck during big
Yeah.
snowstorms. So if you look at 2022 in the water and wastewater, like the labor we're quite a bit under budget on operating costs there. Just that, when you do get those dumps of snow, there's nobody doing utility work. They're
Right.
just, everybody's on a plow truck.
So that's kind of the trade would go back and
Yep,
forth between,
that's
say,
a big part of
snow
it,
and
yeah.
wastewater.
We do work for third party, like collect revenue to do other kinds of curb cuts or whatever it is like that. And so that just gets put on hold. So, yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. For example, the work they did up to remove the old bridge across the gyro pool. So those crews that would have been doing snow removal were able to do that project, which is, under a capital number as opposed to an operating number. So Public Works labor is really tricky because we use them for capital projects, we use them for utility projects, we use them for general operating, so depending on the year, we might, and because those funds come from different places, it's tricky to manage the operating budget year to year because of that. High snow year, they're all in the general operating budget. Low snow year, they're doing some capital works, they're doing some utility works, and they're in other budgets. So that is probably the one variable that's on our staffing that is the biggest one that's hard to predict year to year.
Okay, so Public Works Other, some examples of items in there would be drafting, street lighting, line painting, and Public Works yard maintenance, as a few. We ended slightly lower than budget due to some projects that were delayed and pushed to 2023.
I'm just interested because I thought, I saw a team of line painters go through my neighborhood and they weren't driving our trucks, so do we contract that out?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, but
That's
it's
still an
just
expense.
charged under
Yeah.
there as an expense, but okay, that's all I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, this includes our own labor and
Right, right.
contracting.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you. Yeah,
everything that's an expenditure.
yep.
Jumping down to waste and organics was pretty in line with budget. Cemetery services saw an increase in labor from the increase of number of burials and general maintenance and repairs.
Yes?
With regards to the cemetery services, if I remember correctly, the water that goes, like if we have
They have a
we could be
well?
going into a kind of a drought situation.
They have a well.
They have a well, okay. I just
Yeah,
wanna
we
make
do
sure.
not use the
Yes.
city water that's been purified at Mountain Station for the cemetery.
Thank you. Oh, right. Thank you.
Counselor Payne?
I am interested in this. That cemetery is a beautiful place. And as far as the upkeep of it, so it's certainly not carrying its weight. It's more of a, as a, do you know what I'm?
Community
trying to-
service?
Yes, that's what we look at that as then. It's one of the, I wouldn't
It's a
go as far
park.
as an amenity,
It's
but,
a park. It's
Yeah,
it's classified as a park
Okay,
under
okay.
the official community plan. I mean, we don't quite use it as a park. And
A lot of people
also,
do.
we have an agreement, well, I mean, it's not like.
no, I understand,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of walkers
Oh, yeah.
up there. It's
No,
a,
I
it's
mean,
a
I always call it the
destination
park.
for people
I call it one of
to-
the biggest parks. It's the third biggest park
Yeah.
that we have in Nelson is actually the cemetery. To the city
Okay.
manager, we have an agreement also with the, another one of these service agreements that we have with the Regional District of Central Kootenai, where we've tried over the years to actually look at trying to increase the cost share there, but there's always some ongoing kind of weird glitch on that, but that is we do get some money from the RDCK in regards to the cemetery, just for those that are new that may not know that piece of information.
Definitely needs to be revisited though,
Yeah.
for sure.
So would that type of thing come as, where would like RDCK money be, that comes in go? Other revenue?
That is under sale of services they provide.
Okay.
It's somewhat
that's good.
nominal.
Yeah, it's a nominal, it's not hardly
20
worth writing
20,000.
down, but that's where it is. But
20,000 for the cemetery.
Yep.
Okay.
just so you know that there is an agreement there.
We get some minor money from the Legion, or, I don't know, from some government agency, I believe,
Yeah, to
for,
keep up the
the-
soldiers area of the
Yeah.
cemetery.
Yeah,
And in sales and service, we also get money from Salmo and not from Salmo anymore?
for what?
For financial services?
Oh, yes.
No, we're talking
Oh,
about,
no,
I'm
we're
talking about the
still at the
cemetery.
cemetery.
Oh, we're still in the
There's an
cemetery.
agreement on cemetery, sorry, yeah, but before we go through all the sales, there's a, yeah.
I know what you meant.
Yeah, I was with you.
I had a question, I
got
was,
me on
that
cemetery.
just threw me.
Salmo Cemetery, don't we run that too?
So can I just ask, is that fairly typical, the way we manage our cemetery is fairly typical of other communities? Is that,
In what way?
in that it's a park and a public service and,
Well, I think you've been in many communities, and there's a broad range of how cemeteries are managed. Some are very rustic, and we
but it is
maintain
a
our.
city-run facility?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Yeah, other than, the crematorium, we don't run that. We lease that to the
funeral home?
funeral home. Yeah, they manage that. But we do all our own, we do all the burials and all that part of
Yep,
it.
thank you, just
Yeah.
interested, sorry for the sidebar there, but.
And we have looked at, we do look at those fees relatively, every 3-5 years, I believe, and go out and see what others are charging for their burial fees. I don't think it's full cost recovery, but I'm not sure if we've looked at that.
We did look at that. I remember in our first or second year in the
Yeah.
last council, we talked about it, and I remember it being quite a bit lower than cost recovery. Like, we
Yeah.
were definitely not recovering.
And I guess there's the managing the park aspect of it and then the burial.
I mean,
part of it.
plowing,
Yeah.
cutting the grass, watering,
Yeah.
all of those things are factors
Yeah,
for
I
a
think-
park.
Yeah, all that is not part of cost recovery,
Yeah,
for
no, no,
sure.
no.
The park part, for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's apparently costs more to do a burial in the winter than it does in the summer, so.
Makes sense.
Did they-
Frozen ground.
Yeah. Okay, learn something every day.
Okay. Talking about parks, recreation, and cultural services. We saw a decrease an overall decrease due to the COVID recovery funds of $154,000 that we did not hand out in 2022. So that ties back up to line 18, which we've also pushed those to 2023 and added $50,000. The decrease of not handing those out was offset by an increase of labor, specifically for the youth center, that we saw the increase in revenue as well, as they had strong attendance and programs. And then a slight increase in campground labor fees as well. That had increased revenue.
And this line includes all our contributions to touchstones and capital
that's what I
and
wanted
all
to know.
those
Correct.
grants, yeah.
Transit is coming in slightly over, but again, touching on the revenue side of sales of service, we've seen an increase in ridership as well. And then just some general fuel costs and maintenance costs going up. The library grant transfer is in budget. One item to note in the allocation of reserves and surplus to our reserves, our equipment reserve is coming in slightly under what we had budgeted for, and even though charge-out rates were slightly higher in 2022, unfortunately, maintaining the fleets outgrew that. We will be looking at the charge-out rates to the intercompany department or intercity departments for 2023, especially when we want to start putting in more of the reserve in 2024 and onwards.
Councillor,
I will note, sorry, in 2021, we budgeted 900,000 and put in 950. In 2022, we budgeted 900, and just based on, you know, Jody managing the operations there, I think we'd only be able to put 850 in. Just the cost of fuel, maintenance on the vehicles higher than charge outs, but like Amy mentioned here, we'll kind of be looking at charge out rates and what that looks like going forward, and that needs to be adjusted.
Councillor Payne.
Sorry to skip you back, but the library grant transfer, the library came in and asked for a specific amount. Is that this amount?
That's the 644 for 2023.
Right, and that's what the library asked for?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah, we don't have their revenue and expenses on here. We just have, hey, here's how much the library
Yeah,
asked from us.
no.
But yeah,
I just, I know they asked for a little more than they
Yeah,
had
they
in
asked
my,
for basically for 4%,
Isn't-
was what their ask was.
Yep.
Mayor,
That's what I want
if I
to
may, isn't the
understand.
general policy to not just sort of do business as usual, and then for things like over and above, that would come to us, and then we would start partitioning out where, like, so the library would, we should have it at the 618 or whatever, maybe plus an inflationary, and then we do, as a council, we decide whether the library should get the boost or not.
yeah,
Isn't
we
that
could
normally-
frame it like that. Yeah, no, you're make a good point, because we're doing some of those other asks, you
Yeah.
know, the capital and all that kind of thing.
Like the
I mean,
cultural
the library's part of the city. It's a little
Sure.
different than those ones, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And this isn't an approved budget by any means, right?
No.
But yeah.
No, I
that's
just
fair
for
for
clarity,
presentation
just
purposes.
for clarity.
We don't normally,
Yeah.
we don't normally hold the library aside. It's not one that we've normally traditionally held aside for
Right.
discussions about the other asks.
Yeah, I know it's not like the capital, but
Yeah.
I seem to remember us
Yeah,
having a
we've never held,
discussion about.
yeah, we've never held it aside, but we could.
so as long as their request seems reasonable, then we go with what it is.
I think traditionally we've just built in sort of the 2%, and if they're asking for above that, then council would specifically approve those larger increase. I don't think we've really,
So we're looking at a 4% now,
Yeah,
which is
so like I
what
say, it could
they
be,
had
it could be,
requested.
it could be pulled out, but I mean,
No,
traditionally we
I
haven't.
just wanted to be clear
Yeah,
on
that's all I just
where we
wanted
were
to-
at.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's,
how the process works, yeah. I
traditionally we haven't
thought
held it aside, or however you want to refer to that. I mean, we usually do touchstones, capital, and DAC.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that we usually hold aside. We don't usually hold aside the library, but we could.
Gotcha, thank you.
And for them, if you recall, it was, you know, they had their inflationary increases, but they were gonna drop the fines as well, so that was a bit of an
Right.
impact for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Tate.
Hi. You may have already said this, and if you have, you can answer it offline. So, water and sewer, water, liquid management, all the thing, that's like a cost recovery department, because it's not on here.
Correct.
So,
Yeah, it's its own thing. It has its own fees, its own expenses, and whatever's left over goes into its own reserve.
same with, resource recovery?
Well, yeah, we do that on a cost recovery as well. So you'd see like we have a transfer to resource recovery reserve, but it's part of the general operating. It's not its own entity really. So it is part of here, but we do operate it on a cost recovery. Here's the fees we collect from garbage and tags and
The green thing I paid
Yep.
this morning. What's number 40, line 45? I don't understand.
So that is the labor and items 4.
So that's not part of the recovery.
The recovery, the fees that we charge for
Sorry.
waste management is above in revenues. You're
Yep.
seeing the expenditures here. So there'd be a 600 and something up in revenues up above,
There.
where
Other
probably
service.
sale of services.
sale of services in there, yeah.
Oh,
So we can maybe split those out a bit
because
more.
it's different in the third quarter report. It's pulled out separately.
We have it as a separate line of garbage fees.
You
Oh,
have sales of service, and then you also have like, well, for water, as an
Yeah.
example, water sewer is here.
Yeah,
Okay.
because that's for the whole, and we also have hydro on there too. This
Yeah.
is just the general operating, so
Yeah.
we're missing those pieces.
So
I'm
we
just a
haven't-
little bit confused because
Yeah.
water, sewer, and hydro can be separate.
Yes.
Because they're their own thing.
Utility.
They're
They're utilities.
utilities.
I got it. But the garbage pickup, that's not the right word.
Resource recovery?
Yeah, so we're having it here as waste and organics expenses and then in the sales of service.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's
Yeah.
that green bill that we got in the
Yes,
mail.
that's part of that, yeah, and it's not its own utility.
Yeah.
It's just in with general government, but like all of our services, we do it on a, cost recovery. So we look at, and I think when we went through the water and wastewater at the end of last year, we also did a resource recovery, and there was a mini budget in there of like, here's the fees from tags, here's the fees from the monthly fee, and here's the expenses, and here's how much we're gonna put to pay for capital, and we kinda had it as its own thing, but
Yeah.
it's in here, sort of
Okay.
blending.
We could break that out further if you'd like, Councillor Tate. The other thing to
Nope,
remember
I can
about
find it.
resource recovery is it's, shall we say, clouded by the fact that resource recovery is actually a function of the Regional District of Central Kootenay. And we're a participant in that. So we don't actually run the waste recovery system.
We do
We just
collection.
do, we do collection. We do one part of resource recovery. And I think that's often the part that people get a little bit lost in, that just in the general public about how that works.
Our portion's a very small part of the larger cost of resource recovery.
Yeah. Councillor Payne.
So, is that one of the reasons, I may have missed this too, sorry. Is that one of the reasons why the 2023 budget looks significantly higher, is because of external forces upon our?
No, that's the
okay.
organics program.
Organics.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so as we roll out, the food cycler program, there's some additional, outreach programs, and I think that budget also included a bit of like not a summer student, but some casual labor to sort of help with that rollout. And we did receive some grants as well for capital, but also a portion of that was for the actual program to roll that out. So there's some grants that help offset that increase in cost.
And just supplemental, so then the $100 that was on our bill that we got, is that net of this, or did that go into somewhere else?
That's in up above.
Sales of
Yeah,
service.
up in the
Right,
sales
okay, so
services,
that
yeah.
went in up there and is being used down here.
So maybe we'll give you a new version where we split out
Yeah,
sale of
that-
service
it
into
would
some
just-
larger areas, so you can see that matching between the two, because it's,
Yeah, if I can see the tops and the bottoms,
yeah.
because I'm drawing
Lot in that
orange
number.
lines all
I
over
mean,
my
there's a
page.
lot.
I think that, when we're looking at sales and
This
services, we're looking at a
matches.
line that's got $4 million in it, probably for the benefit of all the councillors having that split out a little bit more.
Or just on its own separate page, what sales
Well,
of
that's what I
service,
mean, it
not
could
on
be-
this page.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
On a separate page, yeah. I get
Yeah,
you.
the summary's good, but I agree.
And
In
to
and
your,
out, kind of like we do when we do look at a capital,
Yeah.
we show the in and out.
and
Thank
to
you.
your reminder about the wastewater one that had a bunch of projections, I actually can't find that one anymore. Could you please resend it, or could the corporate officer please resend?
The wastewater one?
Wastewater I have, but I do recall a spreadsheet that had like projections that included the organics, and I can't
Okay.
find that one.
Yeah, the resource recovery, you mean?
That, yeah, I
yeah.
can't find it. Yes, please.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
And maybe send it back to all of us.
Yeah.
Please, yeah. Thanks.
Okay, so ending 2022, projected about 110,000 over budget. Again, none of these have been
And,
finalized, as we still have some things rolling in, but that's kind of how the year went.
And obviously, we can't tax or raise any fees for that, so basically we need to take that from previous surpluses to balance this year, so we will bring a financial plan amendment at some stage to do that.
Yeah, I think we talked about that when we discussed the snow clearing piece of, to top that up. That's one of the factors behind it, so,
From 2022.
yes.
Yeah, which we ended up in a better position. You know, we projected 250 at that time, right?
Yeah.
Of a potential deficit. We've got that down to 111, so we're in a bit better shape, and probably some of that interest revenue, et cetera, has offset some of that overage.
What account is previous surpluses stored in, or what line is previous? It's a reserve.
It's on the balance sheet. It's, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, you know, in our financial statements, if you ever feel like kind of absorbing all of this, yeah.
Counselor Tate does.
There
He's
is,
taking notes.
No, I pulled it up. I've got it
Got
out
it
of
out there already, probably.
good. So there's all our reserve balances in here, but there's also the unappropriated surplus, which is just our general surplus. So at the end of 2021, it was 5.4 million.
Okay.
But that included about 800,000, I think, of the COVID recovery funds that are in there. But the remainder of that is things that you would use for this type of situation. And we did some of it at the beginning of the year. We said, let's use some surplus to pay for January, February, March snow clearing. We just need to do some for November and December.
Right.
What line are we on?
Okay, so we've gone
We got to
through.
line 76.
Perfect, thanks.
So we've
Oh,
gone
yeah,
through
that's what I thought.
2022 projected actuals, so if we
Jump back up.
have any
Start at the
questions,
top
but we can jump into 2023 and
Let's
talk
get another
about
color marker here.
this year coming up.
We're gonna do that for every year going up to 2027. No.
We're gonna start with 2023.
But Amy, and Chris, maybe where there's carryover into that next year of, you know, the full expenditures, you know, for 23 here, but it also impacts the next year. For example, policing is an example of that, whereas, you know, because people are hired partway through the year, you know, that commitment isn't fully reflected in 23, but is in 24. So I think it's important for council to recognize, you know, what the ongoing impact of some of those expenditures are.
And the example Amy's already given us is the fact that she wasn't hired until mid-year.
Right.
So when we looked at the expenses there of finance, there was some savings in finance because although we knew that there was going to be a person in that job, that person didn't arrive in the job until 3 months into the year. So there's always that little jig of the fact that you're not necessarily always accounting for a full year of salary, given the fact that there's ebbs and flows within the labor contingent in the city.
Absolutely. Okay, so for taxes, a slight increase from 2022 due to new construction revenue. We're anticipating an increase in our sales of service from the trend of increasing parking meter revenue post-COVID, as well as a continuance of a strong attendance and programs at the youth center and farmers market. With one constable being pulled from the RCMP to cover some city positions at the Nelson Police Department, we will see a little bit of a decrease in our recovery funds for the beginning of the year.
And where are we, what line item are we on?
Oh, sorry, we're on number 10 now.
Oh, 10, okay.
So in other revenues, business licenses have increased slightly just to the actual numbers that we're getting. In addition, we'll also see the return of patio fees that have been waived for the last few years.
And I guess seeing the impact is that last column over on all of these, right?
The green one
Correct, the
there, yeah.
green column.
No, I meant what the budget impact is in column O, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, do you have the black and white version?
No,
It is,
I'm-
it
Onto
is
the green
green
version.
and blue, it's just harder to
Oh,
see.
Yeah.
It is green, Kevin.
Yep.
Yeah.
That column.
Dark green, sorry, yeah.
O is green.
O is green? Okay.
O and P are green.
Unconditional grants will remain the same as prior year. Conditional grants We'll see an increase, as Chris mentioned earlier, in some operating grants for the organics program related to the food cycler and also the Climate Action Partner wage subsidy. Interest income, as we touched base on it earlier, taking a bit more of a conservative approach of having interest rates slowly return back to normal levels.
Janice, can I?
Yeah, sorry.
Mayor
I'm
Morrison, pardon me.
I'm going from, sorry, I'm reading the line from one way over on the left side to the
Yep.
way
Yeah,
over on
me
the right side.
too.
I'm not looking up.
You have to
So-
fold it like a Mad Magazine.
thing.
Oh,
Yeah, I know,
thank
yeah.
you. Okay, no, I'm
Done that
fine with this.
before.
I'm hearing from you saying that the conditional grants will be increasing, but then I'm looking over in green column P and seeing 100%. So to me, an increase would be over 100%. Am I,
Sorry, there was some one-time ones in 2022 that we won't get in 2020.
okay,
Three.
so we will be getting more grants, but other ones won't, so it's gonna come out pretty much as a wash, so it won't be an increase in.
Sorry, yes. that
That's
was-
okay, I just,
Those
Thank you.
really fluctuate, like we talked about the Fire Smart grants, and
Yeah.
you get some in one year and the budget's lower, and then you might get more, but then your program expenses are higher, so.
Okay.
That one, they're normally offset with some expense that covers that off, right?
just wanted to make sure I was doing the head math right, okay.
So again, I'm going to skip over the reserves and surplus and we'll touch base on those as we go through the relating expenses. So we'll jump down to line 27. Legislative expenses have increased due to general wage increases as well as our strategic planning costs that we have lined up for 2023.
And I think travel, are we budgeting normal travel again for council?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we had that in 2022, and we'll just sort of continue that piece.
General admin and human resources has also increased due to general labor increases, the organizational review and strategic planning costs in there as well. So the organizational review and strategic planning are funded by line 17, the use of surplus. So those are one-time costs, not ongoing year to year.
And that was just our recommendation in this budget, was some of those one-time pieces we had taken and proposed funding them through surplus as a way to, we won't see them recurring each year. And, we did mention we do have some carried forward surplus from prior years, so that might be a good use to kind of offset some of these one-time costs.
So when you say organizational review, that's what the HR department's presentation was about looking at the, I would call it wage grid. I don't know if there was a different term, and determining whether we were in line with, okay, thank you.
Correct.
Lute, you have a question?
No, that's my thoughtful hand.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just to note again, this also contains expenses for the digitalization project that's being funded by the COVID recovery funds on line 18. Finance planning and Nelson Next. Again, general wage increases and the official community plan. The OCP is being funded by, or suggested to be funded by surplus. These are offset as an overall decrease for 2023. As we looked at some of our purchasing staff wages, we thought it was the way they help deliver the capital projects, it would better reflect the capital costs if some of their appropriate wages were allocated to those. Other general government has just declined due to one-time projects such as elections and the CPR rail station project. Police have an increase in 2023, slightly higher than the amount presented back in November. Now that we have some confirmed rates from WCB, as Chris mentioned earlier, and collective agreements, we've been able to refine that number. As he mentioned, WCB has increased from 6.5% to 8.5%. in 2023. Fire and emergency management has increased due to general labor, an increase in training costs to catch up on a few things that they missed during COVID, as well as one additional part-time executive assistant that Jeff spoke about earlier this year in his presentation. That's to assist with some grant writing and administrative work within the department.
And is there higher offsetting revenues for some of that expenditure?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, we're anticipating, I can't remember what
Or-
percentage, 40%?
40%.
Yeah, that they, in addition to what they can bring into the community to cover off projects, that they could recover some of those wages by 40% by the administrative portion of those grants.
Is that the grants themselves are the offsetting, or?
Yeah, so, you know, they'd bring in, you know, you bring in a grant that does a $100,000 project, but it would also cover, you know, 10% of their admin costs, so that would offset the wage, right?
The operation.
Dropping down to public works street maintenance, slightly increased due to general wage increase as well as supply increases. Snow removal expenses are returning back to normal. As discussed earlier, we're in a better position than 2022.
I should say, like, whatever normal is. You know, we've got it going back to sort of what we have as a budgetary trend. We haven't decreased it for anything that we're seeing so far this year, and who knows, the winter's not over, and we don't know what's gonna happen at the end of the year. But we're just kind of maintaining that inflationary increase to snow removal.
And ice.
Yeah.
And ice.
Fire, it's not the snow,
It's the ice, yeah. And we've got the, you know, the brining system that would come into play as well, that hopefully will help.
Public Works Other has decreased similar to the finance section up above, with some capitalization of management's wages to better reflect true costs for some capital projects.
That's very kind, thank you.
Waste and organics. We're seeing a slight increase there just due to the new organics program we talked about with the food cyclers. As Chris mentioned, a new casual employee will be joining the team to help distribute, outreach, and do some marketing, which is partially grant funded.
And again, some of those grants that we received for the food cycler units themselves had an operating component, so you'll, in the operating grants, that'll cover off much of the increase in costs.
So the long-range plan of the organics is to reduce the waste pickup. So can we, do we reflect that anywhere, or we just have to sort of see what happens?
Yeah, I've just sort of taken the wait-and-see approach as far as tipping fees and things like that. I don't know how that's all gonna work itself out.
Because the idea is to significantly reduce the weight, if not the size of the garbage, and that's what we pay on, right? The weight?
Wait, when you tip it, it's the weight.
No, that's what I mean, it's the weight.
Yeah.
So you can still put in 3 bags, but if you don't have, it's not, if one of them's not filled with potato peels, it'll weigh less.
And someone can correct me, is it 10% that the
Oh, that they're putting up fees?
that the organic matter reduces to in weight, like if you have a.
Oh, 90, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
About
it's
10% is
significant.
the residual.
10%, right, yeah.
But
Really?
the
But we
plan
don't
is
know-
not any of that's going to the waste stream.
Yeah.
My study, to be honest, when I did the study, was probably closer to around 20%, and I did it twice. I did 2 6-week periods. It really depends on what you put in there, and I tried to make sure there was a mumbo jumbo of things, and my understanding is that the new food cycler is more efficient, and given that I may eventually get one, I'll do the study again, because I am a number cruncher. I'll also get the little thing to plug into the wall so I can see my amperage, because I understand that it's going to use less electricity, and it was only costing me 11 cents, so I can't wait to see what my new net cost of running it through a cycle will be, so.
And there's a potential too with the reduce of the organics from the stream that potentially we could even reduce the number of pickups as well
Correct.
in the long term.
Yep.
So save some money there too.
Yeah, And I think we'd be waiting though for that
Yeah,
until a
we'd have to
full,
wait.
Yeah, yeah.
a full city rollout, but I mean,
Less stinky waste in the system
No, we-
might mean less.
what's good is the fact that, so just so you know, and I think you're aware of this, but others might, is that in terms of where we pick the piece that's gonna have them in the pilot, is that's a pickup day, right? So we'll be able to monitor that. So it's not that they're picking up, 4 houses in Rosemont and 2 in Uphill and something over here. That area gets picked up, so you're gonna be able to kind of look and see what that weight, what that tipping might be. I think they'll be able to drill down a little bit more, and that's where we're gonna see the first numbers come from, to see whether or not the weight thing is correct. Thank you for coming.
Oh, my pleasure. I was on a board with a budget of $3 million. I had great difficulty passing accounting. My mind is a very busy one, but I can read a balance sheet, and if you're doing it verbally, I can follow it.
Yeah,
So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your hospitality.
Absolutely.
thank you.
I hope to find out for your second and third readings or whatever you're doing.
Yeah, keep watching. We'll
Get there.
be posting when those meetings are.
Well, I'm sort of not at the other side of the digital divide, but being here in person,
It's great to
works
be in
for me.
person. Yeah,
Thank you for everything.
Yeah.
you're welcome.
Take care.
Do you want this door open or just?
Yeah, it has to stay open, but
Because I mean, you know how we say to kindergarten little boys, you have to use your indoor voice? Well, today, you needed to use your outdoor voice in there. Competition there.
yeah.
Thank you.
Counselor Tate, you have a question?
No, I have a comment. I would caution any long-term savings from the reduced weight because of tipping fees trending upward
Wow.
and population trending upward. I just would caution, like, woohoo, one day we'll save money.
Yeah, I'm not saying that.
It's gotta be part of the program.
Just like, yeah, there's a chance that we'll find it.
Yeah,
Who knows? We'll see.
the weight of organics is a significant portion of the what we take to the landfill on a household basis. So it is significant.
We will see.
And just
That's the whole thing, is we're waiting to see what the outcome is, and that's just one measurement, and that's part of why we designed the plan the way it is, whether or not it shows us what we want.
Good science doesn't show what you want it to show.
No, I know, it
shows
always shows you when you forgot to measure. Yes, I remember those days. I think that's why I didn't do my PhD.
We start with a hypothesis.
And that is the hypothesis.
so the detailed sheet that you got on resource recovery, there were some assumptions of lower tipping fees, I believe, that we had in there. Anyway, you'll get that.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. Time will tell.
Okay, back to line 47 for cemetery services. We've increased labor and repairs just to be more in line with actuals for 2023. Parks, recreation, and cultural services. Labor increases just for general staff, as well as an increase in the youth center programs and attendance, as we saw in the revenues increasing. In addition, we also have an extra $50,000 of the recovery, the COVID recovery funds included in there, which are being funded by line 18 up above.
Amy, if I may, if I'm not mistaken, there's nothing in the community charter of the local government act related to our responsibility to provide cemetery services.
I think cemetery is a required service. It is a required service, yep.
Yeah,
That's why the RD is part of this, because you need to provide cemetery for each, even in an unincorporated area.
I had it here.
Okay. And then because it's, we're land poor and there's limited service and it's not something that's maybe broadly available to everybody, are we required, if somebody desires a plot, they get a plot?
In your community, yes, you're responsible for your own citizens, yes.
Right, but you could say, well, we're not doing any more plots, it's all cremation, can we do that?
Not sure about that. We'd have to look into that one.
I just seem to remember a story about, like, maybe it's Vancouver, where it's like, basically you pay a ton of money if you want a plot, the default is cremation.
And but I think, again, that comes to the thing about the differences of is that owned by the mortuary? Like some mortuaries own all of that land. It's not city-owned land. So that's when Kevin said earlier about every place is a little bit different in terms of rural and rustic and, you know, and the city managing it. Like there's two in Samo, like all of my partner's relatives are in a cemetery that the Russian community, if they want to keep the weeds out, have to go and weed, whereas there's actually a cemetery in Salmo, and that's the city of Salmo looks after it, right? So there's the whole spectrum of, and yes, it's cost prohibitive, and it's even cost prohibitive if you want to put the cremains in the ground, let alone the whole casket in some of the cemeteries in Vancouver.
So then I wondered, given the $250,000 for just cemetery service, shouldn't we aim for cost recovery?
So
And then
I should say a lot of that is, you know, like it's a park.
The park side
So
of it.
they're up
That's
there.
the
they're-
mowing and
in
the,
cemetery services,
Yeah.
it is.
So they go up there and they
They mow.
prune some trees and mow and all that, and then they charge it to cemetery services. I mean, I guess if we want to get really granular, we could be saying like when you're up there just doing cemetery services, use this. When you're maintaining it as a park, do this. But it's kind of the way it's been is it's kind of
It might be better for me if I could say like the burial services and the things directly
Yeah.
related to that should be cemetery services. The rest should be parks, and then we can see a more cost recovery
Yeah.
analysis.
We can look at that.
Yeah, it goes, you know, it's really then, we gotta start from it'll be tough to get some historical data, but it'll be going to like, hey, when you're up there doing this, code your time here. When you're doing this, code your time to this number. And I'm starting to track that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, when we're obviously doing burials, then you're gonna have equipment up there, right?
Yep.
So,
And especially where does it go to redo the agreement with the RDCK? Because on expenses like these, $20,000 seems like hardly worth the paper that.
yeah,
So
there's.
if you
it's
don't
out there-
break out those costs, it's pretty challenging to give a fair assessment of what that number should be.
Well, they're
But I think
paying
we all
for,
agree it should be higher.
yeah, so they are pay, you know, they do pay burial fees. In fact, I think you're supposed to pay more if you're outside the city, but we have people claiming they're inside the city, and so we have some of those games because they might have a relative in the city. But I think what they're paying isn't just the burial fee; it's partial for that park, and you know the bit of the challenge is, you know, it's the city of Nelson that's chosen to have this more as a park than just a strict cemetery. So we have to find balance there. You know, it's not a park that they've agreed to fund at this time on that park basis, but they should pay, you know, a higher end cemetery cost, for lack of a better word.
And just on a completely different tangent, do you need a green burial society to bring that into the cemetery? How would that
We looked at,
initiative work?
we've talked about a few different things. One, that definitely had a group that came and proposed that. And I think you just need a area.
Because it
and-
saves room,
Yeah,
from what I understand, which
other
is
thing
one of
we-
the things we're running out of.
yeah. The other thing we talked about is, you know, do you have a burial site forever or, you know, can you reuse a burial site? As, you know, again, as a strategy of do you just keep expanding or do you say, no, after whatever, you can go back to the, you know, maybe the family and you'd have to figure out, you know, how do we keep honoring that, you know, that family, you know, I don't know. Anyway, there's definitely some discussion of how you know, use land that's scarce in the most effective ways. Some could be green burial sites, some could be, you know, multiple, you know, burials on the same plot. You know, maybe that's, you know, I know families do that.
that's what we did with our family.
Yeah,
Had 3 generations in one plot.
right. And do we allow someone just to have one plot for the next 500 years or do you say, this is a reasonable period of time. I don't know.
Interesting. Just learn new stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, cemetery.
All right.
check.
Moving down, library grant, as discussed earlier, that's the new ask. We can pull out the additional ask in our next version and just have inflationary in there. Looking at the allocation to reserves and surplus, for right now, it's kind of in line with what we had budgeted in 2022. If we jump down further to line 79, we've heard from some of the community asks, but I believe there's a few more to come, potentially. So that's TBD.
And I passed out that document or attached it to the last email that sort of shows what we had done in 2022. And just before Amy goes down a little further, I just wanted to jump back up when looking at the transfers to reserves. I just have this as status quo right now, or we have it as status quo, except for the capital projects that we take our revenue from parking meters and put it in there. So if we're anticipating an increase in, it really dropped off, of course, during COVID, and it's been slowly climbing back. So if we're anticipating a higher revenue from parking, then we'd be putting more into that capital projects reserve. So that's why you see that one going up.
And that's a strict in and out, right?
Yep.
Sorry, capital projects, oh, there it is,
Yeah.
okay, sorry.
So we've got more going into that reserve in 2023, and that's because we have more parking revenue that's funding that in 2023. So every dollar that we collect in coin goes into the capital projects reserve and a small portion to the water license reserve.
In the case of the Pier project, that we were asking for a stronger justification. So the parking, the new parking potential charging that first goes into the capital reserve, and then it could be sort of directed or balanced. And then as far as like other uses, like renting the parking lot, is that the similar thing? Like, is that when you rent out a parking lot, is that
I think right now
like the whole parking lot at the pier? Like if we wanted to rent.
right now that's,
If you rented the parking spots as well as renting the pier.
To have an event.
Oh, to have an event,
that's the way it was
Right.
designed, yeah.
How did we do
Yeah,
that
so it
at
goes
Hall
into the
Street?
capital reserve, and then it could be.
No, I don't think we would do that with, I don't know, we'd have to, right now, so as far as the request from council, we're gonna look at, what direct revenues can that generate, from leasing out the space, the pier, the canopy or no canopy, and the event space, and look at that as a direct revenue source for that, potentially fund the canopy. We're also going to look at, if we enliven that area, and right now we have not a lot of parking even in the parking lot at the Prestige there. If we enliven that and there's more revenues because of this amenity, we feel that probably could be directed towards that. And, we'll identify for you what additional parking meter revenues or parking revenues we could have along the airport lands as an example. But we're not, ultimately, we think that one's more, where do you want to put that? Do you want to put it in, after in our transportation in total, or you take a portion of that and help it here, or what, help to pay for that fund? The other one, as Chris said, is the downtown waterfront reserve, where we picked up that difference between HST and GST. So right now it funds some core things like the sculptures and I think the murals. So again, there's some money there. So that's what that was intended to, was to fund a project like that. So those are the ones that we're going to pick up to say, how does this fund? And the other one we're going to look at, on the expenditure side, is really look at what would we do? What would that look like if we borrowed over 20 years, how much revenues do we need to generate every year to fund that boring? We probably wouldn't bore like externally, but would bore all kind of internally. That's what we're trying to balance. That's what we'll bring back to you. Can we make all this work by looking at this as a 20-year period? What's those revenues? What would be the cost of that? So that's the piece we'll bring back for you. And we do have Councillor Tate here, so we probably can't get into
Oh,
this
yeah.
one too
Yeah,
much.
can't.
Yeah, I'm ignoring you. I'm looking, not listening.
I just in this general idea of cost overruns.
Yeah.
Which we are experiencing here.
Yeah,
How do you, so whenever we start a project,
yeah,
such as the pier, obviously cost overruns could easily be a reality. So how do you manage that in a budget? I know there's like, when you start a project, you have a cost overrun section.
There's contingency.
Contingency
Yeah.
fund.
But as we've seen here, it can go way beyond that. So how do you budget that kind of
Well-
risk?
yeah, you tend to, it depends how on project delivery. So a lot of projects we tender, and we have a contingency in that tender, so you have fixed price. You know, this project we did on a construction management basis where we were tendering individual components as it went out.
Thank you, Councillor Tate.
Oh. So you're, you know, now you're trading a little bit of risk with getting that project delivered in a reasonable time. So you could either wait till you have, you know, it all designed and it all tendered together and get a general to do it, and then you have your fixed price. And
Okay, so would this be an example of the risks inherent in a city doing development compared
sure.
to a city doing like where we go out, we get a price, and that's fixed price, and then the pressure is on the contractor. Alternately, us actually doing this is the risk of us doing development, that we run into these kinds of things.
yeah, and again, it depends on the project because no contractor is going to assume the risks for ground conditions.
Sure.
Which is what happened
Sure.
with this project.
Yeah.
When, you know, that's outside the scope, you do your design, you assume, they bid on assuming whatever the piling's gonna be, whatever, 10 feet deep. If it's 20 feet deep, we'd still pay that. That's why you carry a contingency. You know, the reality of this project was it was in a very uncertain times, you know, our glazing, you know,
Glass thing, it's crazy.
yeah, glass prices just went through the roof. And, you know, the Lady Bird is a display case. So we had a lot of glass. And, you know, you either decide not to do it, like you can't really have a display case without glass. So it was, you know, there's always risk,
For sure.
but we're delivering that project at a very challenging time. So I wouldn't take this as a normal one.
Okay.
You know, here's a good example of this one where we got a price in the fall, as I said, at about, two and a half times what we ended up getting this job. And we pulled it at that time. We said, we're not, everyone's really busy. We got one bid. We're just not going to award at this time. It's way over our budget. And we waited. We got favorable weather where, that equipment's sitting around not doing anything. People are hungry for some work, and we got a decent price.
Okay.
So
I mean, I guess there's risk in development anytime.
anytime we build something,
Yeah.
you're gonna have some risks. But I think overall, if we look at our projects overall, I think we do a pretty good job of delivering, within budget. We'll be over on some and under on others. And, we're gonna work, with this new GM in place and being able to free up time for our direct folks like the Charlies and the Colin. Remember, we had Colin Innes running both operations and all these capital projects. And, you know, in hindsight, yeah, we were too short, and, you know, doing better, estimating better, at the front end, it's not gonna change the price, but at least council's making a decision based on, you know, a better estimate of those costs. But I think overall, we deliver projects within budgets, and yeah, this one just happened to be
Yeah.
a tough
Yeah,
one.
let's be, yeah,
Can we
let's,
get
let's
back to this,
stop,
because I only have
because,
so much bandwidth.
no, well, she's come back in.
Yeah.
It looked like Council Payne had a question, but are you okay with,
Yeah, no, my question was, once I get diverted, it's harder for me to get
Yeah,
back.
it's harder to get back,
It's sort
yeah.
of like
So we
taking
just
the
need
project
to-
down and putting it up, so
Yeah.
if we can, is that okay if we just go back to this?
Councillor Tate?
I had a question on this sheet.
Sure.
So, line 21, the hydro dividend, it doesn't reflect what my brain is remembering. I was trying to find it. It doesn't reflect the increase that I was remembering.
So the increase we have there right now, and actually that was gonna be my next point. So
good, okay.
on
Carry
line
on.
81
Yep.
is, so 81 and 21, the combination of those is probably the number, oh, sorry, 80. Yes, I have the old version.
Yep, there we go.
80.
80
Thank you.
and
It's 3.6. I thought it was
21.
3.7, but anyways, it's in that ballpark, so there we
Yeah,
go.
so-
That's the money.
in
Here I thought it was going to my salary increase. Gosh darn.
line 21, we just have the inflationary increase, whereas we've got the additional $553 down on line 80 if the COSA rate is accepted. So because that hasn't been finalized yet, we haven't included it.
I thought it was around 7. I got that wrong in my head.
Well, I think if you take the
Yeah.
100 and, what's
Inflationary.
the increase, 157?
Plus the 553.
Oh, that's
It would
where
be
is.
700.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
And then with that COSA rate being approved, we would suggest potentially putting in an additional 300,000 into the building reserve for 2023 in
I
line
would-
81.
You know, I would not use above the inflationary COSA increase to try to balance your taxation, because it's, you know, that was finally getting a real return on those assets, and to use it to just fund a tax increase that I think isn't really good long-term planning. I think the intent was either invest back into Nelson Hydro with some of those revenues, or help address some of these capital challenges that we have going forward. And especially in light of the fact that if you look in 24, you know, there's a $630,000 shortfall in 24, similar in 25, similar in 26, and that's assuming a 3% tax increase already above. So if we artificially keep taxes down this year, it's just accumulating into those future years.
Sorry, I think I heard you say invest back in Nelson Hydro. Do they not have their own reserve? They have their own reserves and funds and things for their own capital, not their own, our own capital improvements and such?
Yeah, it depends where
Thank you.
where we end up on this COSA review.
Right, but like pretending that the COSA gets the big check mark and that this number exists down here, did I hear you say invest back in Nelson Hydro?
Yeah, there's certainly projects in Nelson Hydro. So basically the regulatory model is, you know, it should be city money that's invested in those assets, and you get a return on it, and that generates the dividend or the
The
return.
point of the dividend is that it doesn't go to Nelson Hydro,
Well,
coming out.
but if that's our return on that asset, right?
Yeah,
And now we have this money, we can
Now we can decide where to
reinvest
put
it
it.
into assets in Nelson Hydro and get a return on that money, right? So that's the idea of,
but
you know,
But
if
this-
I'm an investor, and, you know, so if all I had was return on investment and my utility was growing, I would have to invest in it, right? I'd have to take some of my return here and say, I'm gonna reinvest in my utility, and I'm gonna earn another, whatever, 9% on the 500,000 I'm reinvesting in the growth of that utility, right?
But having it here on this line is not reinvesting in Nelson Hydro.
No,
Correct. Okay. And then my last question is additional allocation to building reserve. Does it need to go to building reserve, or can we put it in any old reserve, or can we put in a reserve that it's easy to move it around? Is the building reserve easy to move around?
You could put it into any reserve. When we went through the capital plan, the recommendation was that we start investing more into our facilities, so
Yeah.
that was
So
kind of
that's
where
why.
that came from, but.
Okay.
I also want to say, you know, the future year deficits that you're seeing down below is a bit misleading because we have a 0% in 2023. If you were to have a 5% in 2023, then now you've got that base to grow your tax increase for 2024, so those numbers come down significantly, but.
So effectively what you're saying there is that deficit is just essentially carrying over year.
Yeah.
If we clear that deficit out in 2023, it's basically zero from then on. It's not an accumulating deficit. No, it's pretty much even. So
well,
then
we
my
got
question-
3% there, so we
Yeah,
put
with the
that
3%, right, with the 3% in
Yeah,
the future,
yep,
right.
that's right, yeah.
So I
These
guess.
guys are 3, this is
Yeah,
0.
if I put in just, like, I've just got this thing in here with the number, if I put in a 6.5% for 2023, just as an example, then 2024, we're in a surplus, 2025, we're in a surplus, so it's that, you're right, cumulative kind of impact.
Yeah, so then I guess my question is, why, we've got a $5 million surplus reserve, or
Yeah.
surplus
Bottom line.
reserve,
Yeah.
effectively. It seems to me that's sort of the best use of funds. If we should look to pay off that. I get it. So Kevin, from what I'm understanding you're saying is we need to put up a tax increase here for looking at the big picture. It's just financially prudent long-term in the balance of the various reserves, including the surplus reserve, because we do use that pretty actively. However, if we decided, looking out the landscape of our constituents, let's pull that down. We've got the surplus reserve that would cover this. Like, that's its point. I'm just trying to understand what's our room, our flexibility here. And we've got quite a bit of latitude,
Yeah, and I think for those
a surplus reserve.
those one-time expenses,
Yeah.
then that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's, for the same reason we just calculated here, how it has a ripple effect in future years.
Sure,
If you
yeah.
cover it in the current year, then you just have to double it the next year, if that sort of makes sense. But definitely, like, and we have a few instances here where we did that, where like, hey, we're doing some strategic planning, or we're doing an official community plan. These are one-offs. We're not gonna have it in 2024. Let's use that to cover that. And we've really gone through and
Yeah.
tried to find any of those areas we could where we say like, hey, this is a one-off. Let's take advantage of some of that surplus that we have.
Yeah.
I
And
think,
oh, sorry, go
I just, like, I hear that, you know, it looks like we have money, so let's just pay now, but I'm a
just
bit
thinking-
concerned about the fact that we use some of this money for one-offs, and I think that we have a very ambitious climate plan.
Yeah.
And the thing for me, as always, is that although we apply for grants and we're very successful at grants, sometimes we don't get grants. Sometimes we've made a commitment to a program and we need to keep going out. No grants usually come in at 100%. So we've always got to find that 20% or 30%. And really, I look at oftentimes at reserves allow us to have that flex and flow, that we're not, oh, well, we got this grant, now we need the additional 30%, so we're gonna put up the taxes to cover that. I think that there's so many ways that we can use this money that having that sort of a little toe in, as opposed to like a whole shovelful, like keeps everything smoothed out over a period of time, because there's probably gonna be some, as all of Canada looks to federal grants for their green initiatives, well, we're not all gonna get them. And I've heard around this table many times is that we wanna push forward. So pushing forward, we also have to make sure that we're not pushing forward and making it a tax burden on our citizens. So for me, money is always a cautionary tale, but I think that as we break this out and we get the second iteration of this, maybe we move a smidgen more, you know, to try to keep, you know, if we're talking about, can we actually manage 4 with a little bit of help versus having to do 6? Or something like that. I mean, I think there's always that, we've had that discussion. You've been here at the table for 4 years. We've had that discussion. That's how we got to 0, is that we felt that we could, you know,
Smooth a bit.
smooth it out a little bit.
And I hear you, Mayor, and I think my perspective on this is, I trust you. You guys are great. I mean, you're obviously experts. You're chartered accountants. So I take what you say seriously, and I think what you're looking at is, how do we create a stable organization over the long term? So I get your perspective. I think our role, or at least the way I see it, my role here is to represent the taxpayer and just kind of like think, what flex and room do they have in their lives? And it's sort of a negotiation between the organization and the taxpayer. And that's where I'm constantly trying to push, because I want to preserve the flexibility they have in their households to accommodate potentially future shocks, like future tax increases. Maybe something happens, we get a big wildfire, burn something down. How much flexibility does the taxpayer have in their life to accommodate a future tax increase that's going to have to cover some catastrophic thing? So that's all. And I just want to say that I respect what you guys are doing. It's not that. It's more like I'm trying to find the room to push back and protect that flexibility of the taxpayer.
Yeah, and that is, you know, definitely one thing we worry about, though, when we do that, is because not only would they have to pay for this unknown that we have to tax for, now they have to make up for the fact that they weren't paying, you know, well, they weren't paying already, right?
that, yeah.
So now they have to pay twice, both this new unknown plus catch up from before, because eventually you have to catch that up, right? It's not sustainable unless you catch that back up, and you know how we smooth that, as Chris pointed out, you know, if we had the 6.5, then, you know, if we're in surplus in future years, then, you know, then we can, you know, definitely look at, you know, what does that look, and that's why I asked them to, you know, let's show 5 years here and see what that looks like, and I think you can play between years. We recognize this is a tough year for everyone because of those high inflationary periods, and you know, if pricing comes down on food and stuff in the next year, and that creates, you know, that capacity to, you know, pay a bit higher, you know, tax next year, and we can reduce a little bit this year, in between those 2 or 3 years we get back to, you know, sustainability. You know, I think that is definitely something that, you know, council wants to look at. It's just, let's not bury it in a surplus, and then now we go, okay, well, now you have to pay double, and you know, inflation didn't drop, and our costs are, you know, our cost pressures are even higher next year, and what we're projecting as 2% increases are actually 4 or 5% increases now. Now it's really hard. You know, now you're doubling up on that pain. So, but no, you're right. That's ultimately why a council passes this, to try to, you know, find that balance. And we're going to give you the advice on, you know, here's what we see is sustainable, and here's what we think you need to do in these next 2 or 3 years. And if you want to play a bit with the timing of those, you know, fair enough. But we're never going to advise, like, let's just kind of, you know, lots of local governments did that for years and years and years, and that's why infrastructure is in the condition it is, and all these other things that, you know, then people going, and we're very fortunate that we've managed this, and we have a Nelson Hydro, and we have a, you know, the parking meter revenues, et cetera, and all these other sources of revenue that we generate that other communities don't. Otherwise, you're seeing the 9%, the 10% that you're seeing in those other communities. They don't have that ability that we do to, you know, to generate other revenues in different ways.
Yeah, we could definitely look at some smoothing and things like that. And what can we do so you don't have a high, spike here and a dip here. That's the whole point of doing a 5-year, is that you can kind of look to being consistent, right? That's what you try to do.
I'm just gonna, Kate looks like she's got a question.
Oh, I'm still listening.
Okay, I'm just actually contemplating that, bio break, time for everybody.
And I think we do have someone coming at 3. Is
And
that
I have somebody coming in at 3, but I think we need to have a bio break, because we do have somebody coming in at 3.
perfect?
Are you close to being wound up?
Yeah.
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 I mean,
Unless
we're
there's
gonna
any
see this back
specific
again.
questions? Yeah.
Yeah, this is,
And was there any particular direction
First
that
draft.
you wanted to see from us? Or
Yeah,
do you think
some-
you've got a few ideas from us that, we actually want a few more things broken out so we can kind of see a bit more detail? So
I know
another
we have some other,
additional sheet, and then we've got
yeah.
this to deal with. I don't know if you wanna touch on that, today after we have the next group in, or depending on how long the group at 3 o'clock takes.
And Mayor, if I'm just clear, what you're essentially recommending with this budget is almost a 4% tax increase.
I
At
think
this
it's
point,
6.5.
Don't have any sort of recommendation in here. I'm
Well,
just showing.
376. would
That's
be-
if we use the 553, but we've been,
Yeah.
it was suggested that we don't. You gotta go up to the double lines of the 629.
Line 76.
You're sorry, you're suggesting if we don't use what line?
The 553 in line 80,
Oh, for the hydro surplus?
it's the additional dividend. It was suggested that wouldn't go to our operating budget.
But that's new, that's maybe what Kevin's recommending, but that's not what you guys presented
No,
here.
they're looking
Well,
on the 76.
Yeah, line 76
Line
assumes
76
that
is-
we don't use any, other than the inflationary increase, any of the hydro dividend for anything. If we
Yeah,
did bring
and
any
then-
of it in, we'd put it towards,
But you,
a building reserve, or, yeah, we had some of it for operations here, so you can see on line 84. That's, I guess, one of those conversation pieces of, do we want to,
line 84 is the recommendation of this sheet. Like, that's the final bottom line, given the COSA's increases accepted and we use it, we do put 300,000 to the building reserve. Bottom line here is 376.
yeah,
Like,
and I don't want to call it a recommendation, I'm just gonna call it
yeah,
an
whatever.
option.
An
Yeah.
option, okay.
It's an option, because what we haven't dealt with is this
The
piece.
TBD, yeah.
TBD.
Yeah.
Which also has asked, some substantive, probably at least
Yeah.
1% is the TBD. So,
Is the TBD something we're gonna discuss in the future, or is that today?
well, it just depends on how council feels, after we have the group that comes in at 3 o'clock, whether or not we, if that takes 10 minutes, then we will continue on, or if that takes a bit longer, we might want to, it's been a pretty heady day, so we might want to, and they do have to come back, so we're not,
Yeah, that's
but that's
cool,
where
yeah.
we are now. That's the thinking point. But anyways, take 10 minutes right now, because I think we need to stand up and stare out the window at the demolition and go to the loo and.
Sounds good.
Are we off?
Oh, Kevin's out?
No, he's
Right there.
He's stretched out. He's
really
taking up a lot of
really
space.
taking up a lot
Is
of.
he on the floor? Another
me?
person on the floor?
Come on now.
What do you mean on the floor?
No,
Oh.
he's spread out.
Oh, he's spread out up here. Oh, okay, well, look at,
A lot of real estate.
Somebody was on
I take up a lot of real estate
somebody
too.
was on the floor. Are we doing yoga now at the?
Yeah, I thought, that's what I thought we were missing out
Was that
on.
you,
Forward,
Kate?
like-
Were you yogaing it up?
Draw a line.
Is this?
So we've just
Are you shooting this
put,
over into my space?
we've just put,
Put
the budget discussion on pause for a minute, because our recommendation, number, 8 on the original agenda that we put in as 9, just because of the fact that we have members from the curling club have come to be here while we debate the addenda. We're gonna go to that right now. And so basically what we have before us here is a request for a letter of support for a grant. And the issue at hand is that the grant is also being, the same grant is also being applied for by the city of Nelson And as such, we would need to waive the provision in policy 0550.00.017, council letters of support. So just for, you have a package that was put on your desk about the curling club. And I think we've heard during the facilities index report and such about some of the issues around the curling club and their plant, their ice plant. And so at this point, I will ask the city manager just to give a update and then be open to any questions.
All right, as you identified, we have been working with curling on helping them solve this problem, and some of our staff have, including our climate team, have worked with them on potential grant applications, including this one. And it wasn't till after the fact that we recognized that we were both applying under the same granting scheme, so we had issued a letter of support until we realized that it was under the same granting scheme and or program, and that council's policy did not support that. We told them that we would bring that back to council because it's your policy and ultimately you'll have to make that decision. I think Christina did send a letter that hopefully outlined sort of what that project is, and a key component of that is a total lighting retrofit to reduce that energy usage in the facility, in addition to the ice plant improvements. So I think that's the nature of the project. We've had some discussion as staff. We don't really think this would detract from ours, but we'll go back to the granting authority, or we have talked to them, and they basically said, we get a chance to prioritize our projects, and if, obviously the project we've applied for is we've been clear to the curling club is the priority project for the city. So we have that ability to do that. And not to throw a left curve at everyone here, but somebody actually brought up a interesting point the other night was, maybe there's an opportunity to actually apply for this, for both projects under one grant. The city could apply for both, and we'd go back to, if you want us to explore that, we'd go back to the granting authority as well, and obviously talk to the club and see if the granting authority thinks that would be a stronger application versus two separate applications, so we can do that as well. They're both ultimately our facilities, and we're doing green retrofits in our recreation facilities on the campus. That might be a more compelling reason for them. Obviously they got some good letters of support for this project, so it might make some sense to submit one, but we'd talk to the granting authority before we did that. So I just want to throw that out there as a potential way that we could possibly even have a stronger application. I don't know that at this stage, but it was a novel idea that someone just said, well, why don't you work together and submit one grant? And they thought, oh, maybe that's something we should explore. So anyway, sorry for the left curve on that one. But the first thing is if there are two separate ones, is council open to just giving a letter of support for this group? I know there was some questions, I think, by Councillor Lautenberg. Are we concerned that this would, because it's more weighted to the ice plant than the energy retrofits, whether that would affect our credibility with the grantors? We don't think that would be the case. It definitely, the grantors are going to look at the fit. They had their criteria under the grant. This one, does fit, and if they'll rate it based on on their criteria, and so we don't see that as detracting from ours or future ones, so I don't think that's a concern. I don't know who else is, what other regional entities are applying under this granting authority. No one's approached us, I don't believe, for any other letters of support, so right now the ones that are before us are the the concourse that we're applying for, and this one. So that's kind of the best update I can give you at this stage.
Councillor Weber has a question, then followed by Councillor Lochinvar.
So I really hope this is not like a win or lose situation here, because I mean, that's not great. I mean, it'd be really great to work together, obviously, to get this to happen. My concern would be if the grantors see, 2 grants coming from the same municipality, and then, putting them in kind of competition or something, wouldn't be great. So I would say it seems like the best path forward would be to do what you said there, to contact the granting agency and see if we can wrap it all up in one, so that we don't have to have a winner loser situation. Because I think, their goal is very important, and our goal is important. So, yeah, I worry about the competitive nature there. So I guess, but you can't really comment on that until you've talked to the grantors, right?
Yeah, we'll talk to the grantor. I think, how they ultimately make decisions on these is always a bit of a mystery. And so it's, you are able to go back with them after the fact, and, generally they say it's just you had a great application, it's just oversubscribed.
Right.
Is sort of what we hear most of the time. So, yeah, it's hard to know, if you had a larger one and a smaller one, and they're oversubscribed, and they aren't going to fund the larger one, would they fund the smaller one, and one person, you get some of it, or it's a bit of a crapshoot. But the work we do up front is to actually talk to them and get their advice, and, they're not the decision makers, but they're the advisors, and they've generally steered us in pretty, good direction, so.
Okay. Thank you.
And just to remind everybody, the question really in front of us is whether or not we will make a change to our policy to waive that provision that normally we would not be giving a letter of support. So, Councillor Lochinvar.
So 2 things. The first, unfortunately, Councillor Page, who's the chair of the Rec Commission, couldn't be here today, but he did send along an email to us that I'd love to share with everybody. So this is from Councillor Page. For consideration today, the crux of the curling conversation is the time pressure from the city to have the ice plant upgraded by next season. As it stands, the compressors are end of life and have been for many years, but they've been pressure tested and were deemed safe for this season. I am of the opinion that with the large pieces at Recreation now seeing movement, the entire campus review, the potential opportunity to merge the plant into the NDCC in 2025-2026, and the conflict there between our granting streams, that the city needs to bring more flexibility to this situation. I've heard from subject matter experts in the area that the end-of-life compressors are not broken equipment, but they are past their best before date, just like our fire truck. Paying a few grand each season to pressure test and clear them for each season may be a reasonable stopgap measure. This would allow the RDCK, Nelson, and the community answer the questions outlined above. It also gives curling enough time to raise the funds they need to renew their plant if it is not relocated into the NDCC. And he's included the report from Strong Refrigeration that Rec 5 commissioned about this question back in September. So it sounds like from Councillor Page that there's a path forward. We'll just keep investing on a year-over-year basis to clean and do what's needed on the current plant, and then that gives everybody a chance to complete the Planet Rec Commission, and then by 2025, 2026, hopefully, there's one plant between the 2 buildings, and we've got a best sort of a best case scenario.
Did you say one plan or one plant?
One plant, sorry,
Okay.
one plant.
And one
two.
plan, actually.
And one plan.
Yeah.
But that to me seems like that's a great compromise. We'll have a,
So what does that do
I'll
to the
just-
situation we're in right here?
We
the
don't
situation
have
is we don't put forward the letter because, and that's what Councillor Page is recommending, is that because the risk obviously has been raised, it might get us past, but competing with two grants, what we heard from, I don't have to put you on the hot seat, CAO, but I remember this situation arose at the start of our last term, and it was when you have two grants going before one grantor, they're going to go with the lower grant if they can, as they deliver on it. And so we present a real risk to us, our big grant at the Civic Center, losing that over for a smaller grant here at the curling club. So that's the risk. And this sounds like a good compromise. Get through the planning, and eventually we get to one plant that is one that we can maintain in the long term and give curling a long-term viable home. That's great. Seems good to me.
Can I just comment on the on the compressor? So there is ammonia in that compressor, and it is a significant health and safety risk. You know, as you know, in Fernie, there was fatalities related to it. Much smaller plant, much less ammonia. But I know our facilities manager is not comfortable with this operating more than this 1 year. And that's based on discussions with the folks that have been looking at that plant. I don't know, Christina, if you want to speak to it any more, but if council allows that. But certainly that's the very strong recommendation. That was my sort of push. You know, it passed this year. Can't we just, do that again? And it was a strong pushback that that's not an option. And certainly what we've heard from the club, they don't feel that's a viable option from a safety point of view in that building either. And so
that basically loops us around to where we were.
yeah, I certainly
say
wouldn't
on that-
rely on he's not a, this is from the refrigeration people, right?
Right, but this is what Councillor Page seems to be saying, is that he's got different information. So I'd personally feel more comfortable to get him involved in this if he's done the
Well,
work.
I think we need to rely on our facility manager, not, the chair of a rec commission.
Yeah, who's getting information from experts
Well, that should
on
go to
this.
our facility manager, not,
Yes, if he's got some new, I guess the point here is that I'm reading what he's written here. I have heard from subject matter experts. Then he needs to bring that information forward, because
Yeah.
I have
So
to say
agree.
that what I have heard from the facilities manager is that he, in fact, wanted the curling rink closed last year, and we were able to accommodate. They did have to close for a period of time, lose some of their ice that was already in while the pressure testing took place, and it passed. But I heard a clear statement from our facilities manager that this would be a 1 year only opportunity. So it's unfortunate that Councillor Page isn't here if he's got other expert opinions that need to be brought forward, because the facilities manager has made his decision based on the report that Councillor Page has attached.
Okay. Well, I would just say a couple of things in addition to that. It would be great to have Councillor Page here for sure. And I mean, because we're kind of left in between a couple of competing stories. So that's not great. Having said that, I'll just say this is the wrong grant for this anyways. Like the chance of getting this grant is extremely low. And I'll tell you why. Because this grant, there's $1.5 billion from the federal government spread over 5 years, $300 million a year, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, primarily. Like they've broadened sort of the definition of the grant a little bit. But if you look at the history of this is a GHG reduction program. So that means fuel switching primarily, going from natural gas to electric, or doing sort of deep energy retrofits to reduce the emissions of that building. This will not qualify because you're talking about an electric. Sure, there's energy savings, but it's just electric. You're just reducing electric energy, so there's no GHG emission savings. Also, they're going to look at, if this is an end-of-life plant, then you're not actually getting any GHG emission savings within the plant itself, because the alternative is it's end of life. What it does is it may increase, you'd be applying for the grant to increase emissions with a new plant. So I have two kind of competing concerns about this. One is that it's not going to qualify, and it doesn't, on the face of it, it doesn't seem like it's going to come close to qualifying. The second is, if it does, it would be because they see an opportunity to give the city of Nelson some money, a lot less money than they would otherwise have to give for a bigger project. It's like, oh, it's not a great scenario either way. Anyways, that's.
CAO, what do you make of that? I mean,
I haven't looked directly into the grant. I don't know, Chris, if you have or not. I assume the curling club has, and I believe they've talked to the grantor. So they would be in the best position to comment on what feedback they've got from the granting authority, whether they felt it was a fit or not.
maybe go to representative?
What, if you'd like to, so we'll go through the process here.
Sorry.
A motion to allow, and I will ask that it be, I guess, Christine to come forward as president of the curling club, who's been very involved with this project.
So I'd like to put a motion forward to allow Christine to come.
Freedom of the floor, okay?
Yes.
It's been moved by Councillor Woodward, it's been seconded by Councillor Lochberg. All those in favor of freedom of the floor, and that's moved and carried. You now get to come forward and take one of the red seats there. And then if you don't mind turning on somebody's gonna do it for you. The little blue button has to be aglow there so that everybody can hear you out in, I guess you can't call it television land anymore.
Cyberspace?
Streaming land.
Space sounds better.
So, Christina, welcome.
Thank
So, you've heard a couple of questions, one about, did you have some consultation with the granting agency as to whether or not this was the appropriate grant to be applying for?
Yes, so we've been working with Polar Engineering on this project. So we've committed to about between an $8,000 and $9,000 bill with them at this point for being our representative and helping us put this grant together with all the engineering work. They feel we have a very strong grant based on they have put these reports together for numerous groups and municipalities, and they feel we have a good grant. And to respond, Councillor Lautenberg, I guess if you think that we have a weak grant according to the GICB criteria, then I would say that is there's really no reason not to let this grant go forward with the city's grant as well. Because part of your conversation is saying we don't want competition for the grant that is our priority. And we don't want the curling club to get the grant and not us. Excuse me. But on the other hand, you're saying that we have a very weak grant and that chances of it being approved are slim. So there really should be no reason why the policy can't be waived if it's to no detriment to the city's grant for the theater.
Then I'll just flip that right back at you. It's like, if it is a strong grant, then it is a competition with the city. If it's a weak grant, it's not a competition, then it's not the right place to go. So
Yeah.
it applies both. If it's a strong grant, it's in competition. If it's a weak grant, then
Councillor
it's not
Lochberg,
worth
can
putting
I
forward.
remind you to address me as
Sorry,
the
through
chair
the chair.
and not debate with the
I
person at
apologize.
it's not to debate with the person that's giving us information. They're here for
Yeah,
information.
no, you're right. I
We can
apologize.
debate amongst ourselves about whether or not the pros and cons of what we're doing. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, the other one that came up was the condition of the compressor, and I don't know if you have any
Yeah.
additional comments. When we met, you
Yes.
certainly were clear to us that you did not see trying to operate another year with that
Yeah,
current.
well, and to clarify, it's not the compressor, it's the condenser.
Condenser,
The
yes.
two get confused in all the conjecture. So as far as we are aware in our meetings with Mr. Ellison, our facilities manager, we have posed that question to him as well, is if we could pressure test again and have another year and keep this process going, because we are looking to a bigger, longer-term goal of potentially combining ice plants with the RDCK, or with the NDCC, I should say. So that would ideally be in our best interest. We would love that to happen if we could buy another 3-4 years to get to that point. Mr. Ellison has, as far as I am aware, like I said, if Councillor Page has different information, he's made it clear that he does not feel that that is not an option whatsoever, based on the information he has from the refrigeration company. So that's what we are running with. If that would be an option to do another pressure test year by year, we would be very open to that. But as it stands right now, from our standpoint, this grant, with our timeline that we're on to be able to open in the fall of 2023, is our best chance that we have seen. And my concern is that if this policy stops us from putting this grant in as well, then any other large grant that comes our way, even if it's a different timeline that maybe we can't open this year and we have to wait a year, that we're going to be in the same position again, because most of these large grants, the city is putting in another application for another project. And we're going to be in this same room again saying, please waive the policy so we can have our grant application looked at as well.
Councillor Woodward and then Councillor Payne.
I guess this would be directed to CAO. Liability risks. If we, let's just say we went ahead and did this kind of year over year thing that Councillor Page is talking about, and then there is a leak, where does that put us?
That closes the facility.
But
Well-
if there is
Yeah,
an
if our-
injury, I mean,
If
we're
our
talking.
facility manager's on record that recommends that against that, based on his recommendation from a refrigeration expert in this area, and we ignore that and put people in harm's way, and we have a fatality or something, I'd say we're in significant liability risk. Remember, we only have to be 1% liable.
Yes. So this is fairly,
Like, we would need something strong from,
yeah.
from an engineer or specialist that would sign off on their liability that, that this is safe. Because right now, we have the opposite. And we're talking, something that we know is a life risk. And there have been fatalities in the past with this, though. So that's why you're hearing from our facility manager that, we're not talking the equipment breaking down and you don't have ice for a year. We're talking about the potential of,
Health and safety.
yeah, or a fatality, right? And, so the only way we could do that would be, we would need a engineer to sign off, and at that age of that equipment, I can't see any engineer signing off that they're gonna take liability risk for equipment of that age with ammonia in it.
Thank you.
Councillor Payne.
My question isn't about the grant per se. I need a better understanding around the policy. So when was the policy implemented? Why was it implemented? And have there been exceptions in the past? That would help me.
Yeah, what's the date of it's not that,
19.
pardon?
2019. Yeah, it's
So-
in that agenda. It's hard to
I'm
pull
sorry.
out. No, it's really hard to pull out because the blue links look like one, but there's actually 3 links there under A, and it's the top link.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not that old of a policy, and it really did come about, I think, with this last council of saying, with the concerns that Councillor Lautenberg raised is, do we want to be, issuing a bunch of letters of support to outside organizations when we know when we're applying for that same grant, and does that risk our, us getting this grant? And that was, I think, primarily outside organizations. There's many of these grants that, a number of different outside organizations went to. So that's the history of it. And again, it was probably being, a bit ultra conservative to say, we want to put our grant in the best light as possible. And would they potentially look at and say, Nelson has 2 grants, we only have so much money and we'll fund this one. But on the flip side, maybe they only had that much money and they would fund one, and not if we didn't have 2 in, they wouldn't fund either one, right? Because we didn't put one in, and the larger one, they didn't have enough money to fund it. So it's hard to, we don't know what their thinking is. As far as we understand and we've been told, is they have a scoring matrix and they score your project, and it stands on its own. If we end up being whatever grant number 132 and they're only have $1 million left, and this was grant 133 and they had the 700,000, would they fund that? I think that's, how do you judge that? But that was the intent. It was really to, so if there was 2 $3.3 million grants going forward, then I'd be probably more worried than one. And I think, as you said earlier, I think the first thing we should do is just talk to the granting agency and see if it makes more sense to apply for one larger grant. They're both our facilities. They're both in the Nelson Recreation Campus. They're both about, at least in part, making energy savings. Our grant for the concourse isn't fuel switching. It's, we've already fuel switched with the other grant, so it's about, part of, how do we make that building energy efficient. So yeah, I can't really answer what the granting agency is going to do, or other than we could talk to them and ask which they think is the best way to go.
Is that a supplemental or another question?
Go ahead.
It's
'Cause-
supplemental
okay.
around the policy, if
Okay,
that's
yeah, then continue, and then Councillor Tate.
So thank you for pointing out I thought it was one big click on and I got to one part. So now that I have the policy in front of me, it also says, the letter is not, no, that's the one. There is no financial contribution requested from the city. So is that $145,000 not being requested from the city?
I think their point is to waive this policy.
To just waive the whole policy, and it's
All 3
not
points.
just specifically on we're applying for the same grant. There's the 2 reasons.
There's 3 reasons.
No, I think
But
the
I mean-
intent of the club is to raise the full amount for this, not the city to pay 20%
Okay,
of
well,
it.
on the current spreadsheet, the current little outline we have right here, it does say City of Nelson, $145,000.
That is a mistake
okay.
on there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, that helps.
Yeah, that
too.
was put together by the engineering company, and I think they
So
were just
info,
making an
so
assumption
the
where that
curling
money was
club
coming
will
from.
be there.
Projecting.
Yeah.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to see how much of the policy we were working on there.
Councillor Tate?
No, I was in the exact same zone as Councillor Payne. I was like, is it all 3 bullets that we're waiving? It doesn't really matter, because I think the request is to waive the entire policy, right? Not just one bullet, because you either waive it or you don't, right?
Councillor Lautenberg for a second time.
I'd move to refer this back to staff for more information and to get Councillor Page into this discussion. It sounds like we've got a couple of things to gather from the grantor, as well as some information about the life of the plant.
February 28th, I think, is the
It's due in 10 days.
So, sorry, I just have to do process here. There is a motion that's been put forward to refer. Does anybody want to be the seconder, or do we continue debate?
This is where, you know, if I was in one of those lawyer shows on TV, I would confer with co-counsel. We don't have that option right here, and I can't call a friend if I was on some other game show.
Well, the second just puts it on the floor for
I know,
discussion.
I'll put it on the floor.
Okay,
Okay, so I think it's pretty clear why I think we should be referring it back to staff, because there's so many things, like the policy. I'll just go back and refresh some history on the policy as I remember it. But the policy came from the CAO, who said that one of the reasons why this policy was needed was because when you put two grants to a grantor organization, in your words, they will go with the lower grant if they can. It makes sense that they would do that. You know, sure, there's a scoring matrix, but part of it is sort of regional distribution and making sure that everybody gets it. And then they look, okay, Nelson's got 2 here. Oh, this one's lower. That's the one we're likely to fund. And in my mind, the Civic is one we've been pushing at for a long time, and it's so critical to get that grant to make the enormous investments in improving that building. So anything we do to risk that grant, I think, is just not prudent for the taxpayer at all. So that's my big concern. It's risky. We're risking something, going against our policy, and the reason for going against our policy just doesn't seem all there.
on the
Yeah.
yeah,
So
on the motion to refer, Councillor Tate.
I would argue that these 2 grants, even if we put in a letter of support, would not be compared by the grantor as coming from the same agency. Am I misunderstanding that? One is coming from the curling club and one is coming from the city,
No.
the applications.
The policy, though, just for clarification, the policy
Yeah.
that the CAO put forward to us was if we have one of our grants
Yeah.
and we endorse an outside grant
And
or
endorse,
any other
okay.
grant,
Gotcha.
that's what the policy exists to prevent.
Right.
So we would be by doing this, we're essentially asking to reverse our policy.
I gotcha.
So, on the floor is the request to refer. And so, usually with referral, seeing as how I'm in Robert's rules, we get to debate it, but usually referral also comes with some kind of instruction, and I'm just listening to these grants all need to be, and I'm sure that the city grant is already in.
Not that we filed it yet, but.
Okay. That we have like a 10-day window. I guess I'm looking for specifics coming from somebody what's attached to referral, because referral with something that we need to have done, referral to a date. I'm just looking for procedurally, I need, if we were to vote on this, I mean, we could vote on referral and it may or may not pass, but if it passes, we have to have referral with some direction.
Can I may I have a point of clarification?
Sure.
The GIBC program we're applying for the Civic, which we discussed the other night, is 3.36 million. And your project that you're looking for?
Just over 700,000. I don't have the paper in front of me.
725,
Thank you.
528. Yeah.
Okay. I just needed that, just to clarify the weight of the differences there.
Yeah, I think as Madam Mayor stated, yeah, we just, if it's a refer, like if you don't like it, then defeat it. If you like it, then pass it. If there's true referral, if you want us to go back to the grantor, I could see that if there's interest. I don't know, from the curling club to potentially combine these grants. Or I respect that Councillor Page is the head of the Rec Commission, but he's not our facility manager. So I certainly at this stage, if you want me to check further with our facility manager, he's away 2 weeks.
Yeah, did he leave today or is he?
Yeah, so he's away on vacation, so I don't think I can do that. And certainly, I don't know if I can have, Director Innes talk to the refrigeration people, but I'd say it's a real long shot that we're gonna get an engineer that's gonna take the liability risk to sign off on that plant, and like, why would you? Just, I certainly work, so I don't know if the checking whether this is viable for 3 more years is gonna make a difference in this grant, but, certainly if it was to go back to check with the grantor, and you could do your approval conditional, if that's an option, to say, on condition that the grantor, either the granting agency doesn't see it as competing or recommends that we, follow it as one, but I think we need some direction.
Mayor,
Oh, I got a whole bunch. So I'm going Woodward, Payne, Lockenberg.
So I just want to, like, I'm trying to, like, this is a kind of a weighing thing here. So it's a 3.36 million piece that we're going for. If we don't get that, we have to take out a loan for $4.2 million. So this is a pretty weighty situation for the city if we lose the grant. So I just want to clarify that with all of you, that this is a fairly weighty situation for us. I'm not saying that one is less important than the other, but I'm just saying that the numbers are huge.
Can I comment on that?
Let him,
Okay.
So all I'm trying to do is put it out here on the table that, like, what we're dealing with is a lot of money for the city if we don't get the grant, and it's a huge weight and burden on the taxpayer because we have to take out a loan to cover that, because we have to deal with that building. So I'm just putting that out on the floor, that there is some pretty heavy consequences on these ways. So
okay, I'm just gonna let them go through the Councillor Payne.
And I guess based on those numbers, I'm just assuming that Polar Engineering found the grant and referred you to it, or was it something you were able to identify and go to them to get some assistance on? How does that process? I'm just thinking, is this the best fit? Is there something else for this type of amount? I would assume that.
We have a grant team put together that
Nice.
that found this grant among about 10 others. Based on what the grant criteria are and the timelines, this was the first and foremost, most important one that we went after.
Okay.
There is potentially another one that we could look at, but the funds wouldn't be available, and the stream doesn't open for almost a year. So it would, and again, it would put us back in the same room again, because the city would likely be applying for the same capital grant stream. And we would be here asking you to waive your policy, because we can't put a grant in without the letter of support because of the ownership of the building.
No, I understand that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of some outside of what we're looking at.
I don't think so.
It's Leslie.
It's me,
Yeah.
it's me, sorry.
Maybe it's Councillor Payne's. Councillor Lockenberg.
So the direction on the referral would be that, if we could go to a vote and defeat it or support it, but I think the referral is actually meaningful. And it would be, given the 28th deadline, end of the month deadline,
I believe it's the 28th, yeah.
28th.
Maybe the 27th.
We have a cow before that. So there is,
On the 28th.
It's on the 28th.
it's on the 28th? Okay, so we'd have to have a special meeting to, sorry, I didn't see my daughter back there. Hey, kiddo. So the 20, okay, so let's say we have a special meeting before the 28th. So that would be part of the direction, is to organize a special meeting to gather the information, to give you time to complete the application if it turns out so. That's one. Number two is to just get Councillor Page's, like, it's unfortunate that it's just an email. I'm assuming, he's a thoughtful guy and I've watched him at that rec commission, and I know the planners, and they've looked at the plan. So I'm sure it's coming from somewhere. I'd love to know what that is. So I would just check in with him. That would be a part of the direction.
On that, right?
Yeah. check in with, so I'm just kind of running through the list, and how we do it is, we can talk about, so that, definitely talking to the grantors to get it, because as Councillor Woodward said, and I really feel strongly about this, knowing the amount of competition for that $300 million this year is massive across the country. And so it's a risk. It's a real, genuine risk. It's not a non-trivial risk to lose that $3.5 million. So I wouldn't feel comfortable like today passing this. It's not, to me, it's not fiscally prudent to do that way. So either we refer it with those conditions and then have a special meeting, or I think I'd move to defeat it.
One thing at a time.
Yep. So I'll leave it there.
Any other councillors wish to speak on referral at this point?
Can I just, if it's those items, I think you could, pass this one way or the other with conditions, right? You would support it if the grantor doesn't feel it's viable. You would not support it if we can get an engineer sign off with that the current ice plant can be used for, a few more seasons. It's just for you to come back, and I don't know what additional debate you have. I think I'm hearing you. One, you don't want to risk the main grant, and we would find that out from the grantor. Two, if it can be limped along, and you heard from the curling club, that would be their preferred solution anyway. So if we can get that one, I would say that's a really low risk that's going to happen. So I think you're really down to, if this doesn't put our grant at risk, then you would be open to supporting it. If it does, then or even hints at, maybe is that what I heard, even hints at putting our grant at risk, then you wouldn't. And to me, then that really, unless they say, there's no way that we're going to look at Nelson's, any community grants from Nelson and say we're going to fund the lower one, because we don't know. There could be 5 nonprofits out there that are applying for $100,000, and if it was all about finding the lowest one, then I'm sure there's probably lower ones that people have applied for out there that we don't even know about. So anyway, if it's managing the risk, because we can manage this one, we can't manage those other ones, then you aren't going to approve it. So you're not going to approve it if there's a risk. You're not going to approve it if the ice plant can continue to be used. And if that's your criteria, then I think your resolution will waive the policy if those things don't happen.
Mayor, as the mover, just a question on procedure. So I'd be speaking to that. I would be happy to defeat this motion on the floor to refer. I mean, that sounds totally reasonable to me. Can I withdraw? You can withdraw. Yeah, I'd be happy to withdraw it then. And
Oh yeah, that's, I feel like CAO is saying a very prudent and it's a smart move forward, trying to sort of protect all parties.
Okay, so the motion just because, let's just keep it all in order.
Withdrawn.
So we can get, so the motion to refer has been withdrawn.
Yep.
That's been approved by the mover and the seconder. So at this point now, I am going to suggest that, from what I've now heard, is that we are going to pass the recommendation as what is in front of us with some proviso of information back that we have now given to the city manager to investigate.
yeah, so if I can move the motion to approve the letter with the conditions that there's no risk, confirmed from the grantor that there's no risk to our grant application, or that the plant can continue to, according to Councillor Page, to get through the RDCK planning process. Yeah. The rec commission planning process,
Well,
or whatever
What I
that,
heard
whatever,
was-
whatever that condition was.
Yeah.
that we
Whatever
can
Council
find
Page said.
the engineer that will sign off on.
We have to,
Yeah, sure,
we
that's
have
a
to
better-
eliminate our
even
risk.
better.
That's what we need to do, is
Yeah.
eliminate our
Yes.
risk.
Yeah. Yep.
As much as possible. That's our
So it's
responsibility sitting here.
it's an or there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would second that. Did you?
Yep.
Yeah, he was moving it.
So I'll second that. I guess we would need to hear the item.
Can you
Yep,
read it
well,
back to us?
Yeah. Poor Sarah there is probably crafting as she goes, but it's basically,
Exception
it's
to the
basically
policy.
A with provisos.
Yeah. We
So-
will make an exception to our policy with those provisos, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would help before I raise my hand, yeah.
That council permits staff to provide a letter of support for a grant that is also being applied for by the city of Nelson by waiving the provision in policy number, council letters of support to the curling club based on these conditions. Confirmation from grantors that this does not put the city's grant at risk, or, this is the tricky one, whether or not, and I have to wordsmith this, but the ice plant can continue to be used, and this is confirmed and signed off on by an engineer. Is that right? That's right.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, we're,
I'll have to
it's
wordsmith it,
basically,
but that's the gist of it.
yeah, that
Can I just be a
it
pain?
wouldn't be, the support wouldn't be
That's my
given
job.
No,
if
that's-
the ice plant has been signed off on.
Based on these conditions, so is it
So
based
we'd
on the
wa-
two conditions
So
or
we'd
the
waive
full
it,
one?
would waive it if there's no
Yeah,
issue with putting ours at risk, and we wouldn't waive it if the ice plant is okay, because then
Yeah.
we wouldn't.
Need to.
Because we
Wouldn't
would
be
need to do
necessary.
the letter of support.
And I just want to clarify that the second bullet, there is no in-kind contribution, facility space. Do we need to waive that as well? Because it's our building, but that's cool. Okay. Just checking. So we only need to waive, because the thing that you read says waiving the one provision. So I just want to make sure that we're not,
yeah, that's my understanding.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just the letter of support.
okay.
Okay, so is it all as clear as mud to everybody at 3:53 on Friday afternoon? So, there is a resolution on the floor. It has been moved and it has been seconded. I'm calling one last time for any further discussion. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Those opposed, and that carries. So, there is where we are at this juncture. So,
What is the timeline on this?
well, because all of us need to get our things in, I'm pretty sure the timeline will be fairly swift. This is Friday, the earliest we can get on this in terms of looking at some criteria around the functionality of the facility is gonna be Monday morning.
And the,
Can I ask a
Monday's a
question?
holiday, I lied, Tuesday. This is what happens when you don't have children.
Can I ask a question now that that resolution is done? Just to go back to what Councillor Woodward was saying in his comment, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to the theater grant application, the city has resolved to loan that amount of money to that project if the grant is unsuccessful. Loan.
Well,
No, it's our,
No,
it's our building, so
facility,
we would be.
need
That
to-
you're going forward with that project.
well,
Project
just to,
is-
so council, are you talking about the Civic Theater Society? Yeah. So back when they first put their application in, they needed to strengthen their application, they needed to show they had their 20% or whatever it was at that time. And that's what council agreed to do on the condition that they fundraised and they wouldn't ever need to borrow that money. So the intent is that they would fundraise it much the same as the curling club is proposing. So it was just to meet the criteria of the grantor that their share of the money was in place.
And so what's really important to note is that this grant that we've just applied for is for accessibility to the whole civic center. So it all gets kind of mushy. But it's not money for the civic theater. They've been raising their money. This is for accessibility for the rest of the building, that money. So we've had a grant for GHG reductions because, as we always like to say, it's like trying to heat a grocery cart. So we've got that grant that's been approved. But we need to have more money, and that's why we're applying for this grant. And yes, we did also put in play, because of the fact that this is a project that needs to be completed, that if necessary, we would look at borrowing.
May I read the actual resolution so that she,
Sure.
because this was at the other, this has happened at the, so the actual resolution that we voted in favor of last Tuesday was this: that council supports a civic center accessibility upgrade project and directs staff to submit a grant application to the Green and Inclusive Community Building GIBC program, Infrastructure Canada, requesting grant funds to cover 80% of the project, 3.36 million. And further, that if the grant application is successful, council commits just funding 20% share of the project, 840,000. That, and then the second part is that in event the city's Green and Inclusive Community Building Program Infrastructure Canada grant application for the Civic Center accessibility upgrade project is not successful, council directs staff to initiate the process to borrow 4.2 million from the Municipal Finance Authority of BC to fund the project. So there is a lot of weight on this grant. And that's what I was trying to just kind of put it out on the table, that we're really hoping to get this grant, because otherwise we
Yeah,
have to.
Jesse, just also, sorry, Council Order again,
Sorry,
to the mayor, not to
sorry,
the
I
presenter.
apologize. So, Yes.
We've asked her,
Sorry.
unprivileged, to come there. She shouldn't have to debate her position
Sorry.
on her project.
yeah, so our position was that we were hoping for the grant. If we don't get the grant, we're gonna take out 4.2 million to cover the project. So,
Yeah, and it's accessibility, as I think one of the counselors says, for the whole building, just the civic
Yeah.
society is just one of the, it's vertical and horizontal accessibility across that whole building for every space in that building is what that grant is for. It's not, even though it does tie into the civic theater's renovations, but it's much more than that. It's about the whole building. The current building is about 5% accessible, and this will make it 95% accessible.
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
And Mayor, just even for my own clarity, I think there's some confusion too in general about the line of credit that we guarantee for the Theater Society, and so those all kind of get mixed up.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, that's what you were talking about
was talking
before.
about the line of
There's this sort of providing this secure line of credit in case of they don't,
Well, in the interim while they.
in the interim while they fundraise the difference. And just for my edification, how is that going? Are they drawing down on that line of credit? Is that, no, okay, good,
no.
that's all.
No,
Because they're not
they've
doing
never
the
touched that.
project.
Yeah, we have
Yeah.
really kicked
They haven't
out.
started the project yet.
Yeah, so there'd be no need to draw it down.
No.
Okay, good.
Okay, councillors, thank you. Thank you for coming up and taking as I like to refer to them, as the hot seat, because they're red chairs.
Yeah, thank you all for your time.
Yeah, and we'll keep you in the loop as to what we find out, and
Who will be my contact person? Will it be
Kevin.
Kevin? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just from a realistic point of view, so that people don't expect we're gonna get an answer from an engineer in a week's time. So even if they submitted and we got that answer from the engineer, they could withdraw their application. They're not, that's not gonna harm our application. So if we can't meet that 28th deadline, because we don't have an engineer's report back,
Right, sure.
they could still submit, and if we get that back, they would withdraw their application.
Yeah, I think the more important piece is talking to the
Yeah.
grantor.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure how that other question's
Yeah, I
gonna
just
go.
don't want
so.
people to say, you didn't get grant, then we went ahead and gave them the letter of support and they submitted, and there is likely a timing thing that they're
Yeah,
gonna have to
that's
submit in advance if we don't think there's any risk from our grant.
Okay, so thank you for coming in, thank you for your curling members that joined us in the back there. It's always good to have a few extra people come in for support and to hear the debate, so. Thank you, and thank you for your work and your submissions so that we could read about the project. Okay, councillors, if I could just, we have the late item. I'm just sort of thinking that I can't see us potentially going back into more budget discussion today, but this late item is of some importance, again, given timelines to get things completed. So what this is before us is, the additional late item is, this is going to the AKBLG, and it's regarding the decriminalization of illicit drugs. I don't know, did you circulate it to everybody or just to me?
Not yet, just to you.
Okay.
I'm about to see what the council says, and
Like, what?
the package will
Yeah.
go out to everyone to review. You're the only one that has this.
Okay, so there's one more resolution that we feel needs to come forward, so just to make sure that all councillors are okay with the city doing the work to get the package out, so this isn't the package, so I'm going to read this. Whereas the province of British Columbia has been granted an exemption by Health Canada from the Controlled Drug and Substance Act to decriminalize the possession of certain illegal drugs, and whereas the province is working with health and law enforcement partners to destigmatize illicit drugs, therefore be it resolved that the provincial government provide financial support to local governments to provide, and you never change that. What did I say with the wording? Sorry, I've got two of them here in front of me. Protective services and education to the public. So basically, we've been downloaded onto, again, because in terms of, they decriminalized, it came into effect on January the 31st of 2023, and we have no tools in the toolbox. Like, we don't know what the process is. It's been very high level, it's been very not really defined. And again, this is costs that municipal and local governments have to then absorb. And so as we look at how we work on destigmatizing illicit drugs and knowing that now you're allowed to have the 2.5 grams, what other roles do we need to be playing? And of course, it comes with a cost. Any education we want to do, any public education we want to do. So the ask is.
Could you therefore be resolved?
Well, therefore be it resolved that the provincial government provide financial support to
Okay.
local governments to provide protective services and education to the public.
Can you put like continuous in there? Continuous financial? Sorry,
Yeah.
friendly amendment?
Ongoing,
Continuous,
yeah.
ongoing, yeah.
News and generous.
I mean, we have nothing right now in terms of this new rule coming in, so there's nothing there right now regarding the new rule.
Yeah.
So yes, it could be ongoing. I have no problem. Like, this is just for discussion. So I mean, given some more time,
Second.
it was
No,
thank-
what?
just to allow staff to have more time to flesh it out. You'll see a fuller, more robust.
Can I just give a couple examples, because we did talk about this at the department head. So what happens in our libraries now?
Yeah.
What happens in rec centers? What happens on playgrounds? What happens in all these public spaces we have? And, we know our community's, concerned about needles and drug use already. And, so, a couple things. We think health, the health ministry should be in our community educating the population. Sarah was on a call and they basically said, the chances of contracting anything from a needle is insignificant, so really you shouldn't be concerned about needles at all. I don't think that's the case in our community. Nobody wants their kids playing on a playground with needles around. So some of those things may have low risk from a health point of view, but they have high concern from a community point of view. And, I think the expectation of our public is that we would clean those spaces up and not have needles or blood or anything else around. So I think there's a whole bunch of impacts of this on local government that they haven't really considered.
And so did you say, sorry, I know, my hand is up, can I speak? So did you say at the end that for education and what's the ongoing financial for?
I think
Or-
we should make it broader.
Yeah, we can make it broader, but I mean, we just needed to get it here, and
Okay.
because,
So
I don't
don't-
think anybody doesn't want us to do this. I mean, so that this is really a case of like the other motions, it's like,
Yeah.
we can sit and wordsmith it to death, or we can just kind of go, yeah, we kind of like this, maybe flush it out a bit
Yeah. I just-
more, because it's so broad,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I'm always, like, yeah, you'll see the AKBLG, it's okay. It's just like, we don't want to make it too broad, but we kind of want to like try to get it to fit, but yeah, I mean, this for sure can be more broadened, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's definitely gonna be that one guy at KBLG that'll debate every.
That'll
little-
debate and say, oh, it's not broad enough, or why did you put that in there, because that's already done, or something, sorry, I didn't mean to like, you'll see it when it happens, but,
I get it.
yeah.
But just to be clear on this, are we experiencing some effects already that we can document as a part of this? Because that would be really helpful because we have a month of experience, we should be able to reference something.
Yeah, our fire chief, for example, said, and this wasn't in a public space, this was in the mall, I believe, that, somebody was bleeding all, sitting there, bleeding all
Yeah,
over the place.
I've heard anecdotal things.
And basically said, I have the right to do this, and,
Yeah, okay,
you
good.
know, we have that
Or
in our,
not good, but
Yeah.
why do we do that?
It's good to have
That's in our
those.
library, what do we do about that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's more about the
good to-
fact that we don't know, and it's not to say that people haven't used drugs in inappropriate places,
Yeah,
but now somehow they're not illegal for a certain amount, and they still could be used in what we might consider inappropriate places, but now we need to have a mechanism for that. We don't allow, I mean, there are some things we can't be under 18, there are some sort of comments about, you can't have it, nobody says you can't use it, it says you can't have it on a school ground, like the language is very interesting in terms of, you can't have it at a school. I can't have it at school, but could I use it on the school ground? I mean, so it's that concept of, we don't allow public drinking,
Yeah.
right? Like, so where does this fall in the realm of other regulatory activities that take place? So it's not, and we don't have a regulatory framework right now to work within, and it's going to be expensive. And I think it's not just for us, it's gonna be expensive within British Columbia, because there will be people that challenge whatever rule or regulation municipalities might put in. So it does need to come from the province, and the province needs to fund it. Is all it's a process thing. Great that you've got something going on, but are you going to fund it?
and I would just, for the whereas or the sculpting of the resolution, referencing our experiences so far makes it so much more powerful. Like, whereas local governments are experiencing
A
X,
30% increase in
Yeah.
public overdoses, whereas,
have that
or whatever that.
information.
or
That's
even
what he was asking.
anecdotal, something to ground it in our experience, as opposed to, because what I can imagine, and I think I've heard this, is like, oh, we went through this with marijuana, you guys get all up hussy, and then it turns out it's not bad at all. As opposed to, no, we're experiencing challenges already. So that's what's driving this resolution, actual experience, not just fears of what might happen. I just think it would make
Well, it would be
stronger.
nice if they were funding a lot of these things before this as well. I mean, we talked about,
Sure, yeah,
we've,
yeah,
our
of
example has always been is that, what is it, it's fire has to buy their own naloxone or police, like they're not, like, so the EMS gets naloxone kits, but our fire department has to put them in the budget, they don't get them, although they tend to be a first responder. It's even the minutia of things like that, it's just like, where's the funding for that? That's coming now out of the municipal, that's in their supply budget, I mean, like, we're paying for that.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, there are costs there. decrim or not decrim. There's costs that haven't been met by the provincial government. And now this program, I think, just looks like another sort of download.
May I move it?
Sure.
Okay, I'll move that resolution then.
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
second.
And that's seconded. All those in favor of that being added to our package, so now I believe we'll have 7 motions going for the AQBLG. They will be circulated, you will get to see all of them, but, and that's been moved and nobody's opposed. So the next one is,
Oh, motion to adjourn?
thank you. That's Councillor Woodward's job. I mean, I'm just like, I always look at him and he's got the, yes. Thank you. Is there a seconder for adjournment?
Sure you don't want to spend a couple more hours?
Oh, you know what, Kevin? Sure. Let's do 2 more.
I'm still having a hard time getting my head around destigmatize the use of illicit drugs. I mean, it's such an interesting thing. We're still gonna call them illicit drugs.
Oh.
I'm sorry, we didn't finish that?
Oh, we
We
did.
didn't finish that?
Who seconded
I
it?
did.
Oh, wait,
Sorry.
Lockenberg, I even said it.
So-
Woodward, Lockenberg.
Okay.
I asked all those, no dissenters,
Thank you.
all in favor? Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we had
I-
Woodward,
Motion.
and then we had Tate for the motion to,
That was the one I was.
Oh, okay.
to, to adjourn,
Yes.
to adjourn.
Did I second? Nice job.
I don't think-